was the light. We took and led the unknown roads, thus to find each other and discover the new worlds. A traveler is in a dire need of orchard when one takes a far and long journey. A merchant needs a man who can supply one with water and bread. One who can share the knowledge and culture and wine. Here is a place where one could feel at home. Ancient traditions of hospitality, a trustworthy ally, a wise partner whose word is bond. We started to build the roads to see each other, bridges to reach each other, and we swam across the seas to share more.
Welcome to modern Georgia. In today's world of interlinked economies, there is a new momentum for Georgia to reaffirm its role of a regional economic and logistics hub. Georgia boasts dynamic, forefront policies directed to ensure attractive investment, business climate, and smooth cross-border trade coupled with efficient, transparent governance. Through its solid FTA network, Georgia offers investors an access to over 2.3 billion customer market without customs tariffs. Modern Georgia is a regional trade hub. Continuous trade facilitation efforts have placed Georgia at the leading position in the region. According to the latest WCO time-release study, transit formalities at the border take on average 4 minutes. Georgia is a great destination for manufacturers from all around the world. Whether it's to enter the regional, the European, or the broader Asian markets. Liberal, free market economy, low corruption, low tax rates and transparent taxation system, security and openness to FDI have become intrinsic characteristics of the country. Modern Georgia is a logistics hub. To ensure fast, safe and cost-effective movement of people and goods, the government of Georgia has set the development transport infrastructure as a top priority. Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway line is creating direct rail connection from the Caspian Sea to Turkey and onward to Europe. Construction of major hard road infrastructure is underway, and soon it will take just 4 hours to pass through Georgia. To ensure productivity, efficiency and reliability of Georgian seaports, the existing as well as new port infrastructure development remains a high priority. Batumi, Supsa, Poti, Kulevi, Anaglia construction of new deep sea port is of regional importance. Georgia has 3 international airports with increasing number of passengers and developing infrastructure. Georgia offers a wide range of transport routes through different connectivity initiatives. Traseka, Karek, Middle Corridor, Lapis Lazuli, Persian Gulf Black Sea, and similar initiatives. Also, in January 2019, the Trans-European Transport Network was officially extended to Georgia and EAP countries. Modern Georgia is a regional energy hub. With an abundance of renewable energy resources, Georgia is listed among the clean energy production countries. By developing energy transmission projects, Georgia has a prospect to become a major exporter of green energy in near future. Georgia ensures secure transit of natural gas and crude oil across the South Caucasus. The country contributes to the energy security of the region and EU through Southern Gas Corridor. Modern Georgia is a regional innovation hub. With the rapid digitalization, a startup and innovation-friendly environment, easy regulations and investments in education, Georgia is laying a solid groundwork to enhance its innovation readiness. Modern Georgia is a tourism hub. The authenticity and unique cultural heritage, beautiful nature, fascinating landscapes, delicious cuisine and high safety have turned Georgia into a four-season premier travel destination. With 8,000 years of winemaking history, Georgia is the world's cradle of wine. With a liberal visa regime and enhanced connectivity, Georgia is one of the fastest growing travel destinations globally. Georgia, a country that has a lot to offer. Strategic geographic location, resilient economy, business-friendly environment, expanding web of FTAs, streamlined customs procedures, rapidly developing infrastructure, transport, digital and energy networks made Georgia well integrated into the global economy. Welcome to Georgia, the place developing partnership for global impact.
Please welcome His Excellency, Prime Minister of Georgia, Giorgi Gakharia.
Kalbatonebo და ბატონებო, ძვირფასო სტუმრებო, მოგესალმებით. კეთილი იყოს თქვენი მობრძანება თბილისის აბრეშუმის ფორუმზე. დღევანდელი ფორუმი მისი ორი წინამორბედი ფორუმის წარმატების გამოძახილია. მოხარული ვარ, რომ საქართველო განაგრძობს მნიშვნელოვან ღონისძიებას და დღეს ჩვენ სტუმრად გვყავს 2000-ზე მეტი დელეგატი მსოფლიოს 60-ზე მეტი ქვეყნიდან. ისტორიულად საქართველო ძალზედ მნიშვნელოვან როლს ასრულებდა აბრეშუმის გზის განვითარებაში. თანამედროვე ეკონომიკური ინტეგრაციის და გლობალიზაციის პირობებში, როდესაც უდიდესი მნიშვნელობა ენიჭება ქვეყნებს შორის სავაჭრო ეკონომიკურ განვითარებას, ახალი აბრეშუმის გზის კონცეფცია და მასში მონაწილეობა ჩვენთვის კიდევ უფრო მეტი პრიორიტეტი და საამაყოა. აღსანიშნავია, რომ საქართველო იყო ერთ-ერთი პირველი ქვეყანა, რომელიც გამოეხმაურა ჩინეთის პრეზიდენტის ში ჯინპინის ინიციატივას ერთი სარტყელი ერთი გზის შესახებ. ეს ინიციატივა ახალი სავაჭრო სატრანსპორტო დერეფნების შექმნასა და არსებულის გაუმჯობესების თაობაზეა, რომელიც ეფუძნება ქვეყნებს შორის ურთიერთმომგებიანი თანამშრომლობის პრინციპებს და მისი მიზანია ჩინეთსა და პროექტის მხარდამჭერ ქვეყნებს შორის სავაჭრო ეკონომიკური ურთიერთობების განვითარების ხელშეწყობა. საქართველომ მხარი დაუჭირა აღნიშნულ ინიციატივას და უკვე 2015 წელს თანამშრომლობის შესახებ შესაბამისი მემორანდუმიც გააფორმა ჩინეთის მხარესთან, რამაც ახალი ბიძგი მისცა საქართველოს და ჩინეთს შორის ურთიერთობების, ეკონომიკური ურთიერთობების განღრმავებას და რამაც უკვე თავისი შედეგით გამოიღო, დღეს საქართველოს და ჩინეთის რესპუბლიკას შორის გაფორმებულია თავისუფალი ვაჭრობის შესახებ ხელშეკრულება. თბილისის აბრეშუმის გზის ფორუმი აზიასა და ევროპას შორის კავშირების გაღრმავების მნიშვნელოვანი შესაძლებლობაა. აღნიშნული ფორუმი არის ეფექტიანი პლატფორმა, სადაც აბრეშუმის გზის ინიციატივის ქვეყნების, საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციების, კერძო სექტორის წარმომადგენლები განიხილავენ რეგიონში არსებულ ეკონომიკურ გამოწვევებს, მათი გადაჭრის გზებს და უზიარებენ ერთმანეთს გამოცდილებას. დღევანდელი ფორუმი ყურადღებად გაამახვილებს ყურადღებას მნიშვნელოვან მიმართულებებზე, რომლებიც ახალი აბრეშუმი გზის კონცეფციის ეფექტიანი რეალიზაციის საფუძველია. რა თქმა უნდა, განხილვის თემა იქნება ტრანსპორტი, თანამედროვე ტექნოლოგიები, საერთაშორისო ვაჭრობა და ეს ყველაფერი კიდევ უფრო გააძლიერებს და ხელს შეუწყობს ჩვენს ქვეყნებს შორის ეკონომიკური თანამშრომლობის გაძლიერებას. საერთაშორისო ვაჭრობის ხელშეწყობა წარმოადგენს ეკონომიკური განვითარების გადადგმულ უმნიშვნელოვანეს ნაბიჯს. ბიზნესი არის ეკონომიკური ზრდის ძირითადი მამოძრავებელი ძალა და მთავრობის მიერ განხორციელებული სავაჭრო რეფორმების საბოლოო ბენეფიციარიც. შედარებით მცირე ადმინისტრაციული და ლოგისტიკური ბარიერები და სატრანსპორტო შეღავათები, გამარტივებული და ჰარმონიზებული სავაჭრო პროცედურები ხელს უწყობს ქვეყნებს შორის ვაჭრობის გაძლიერებას. მნიშვნელოვანია რეგიონში არსებული მულტინაციონალური მოთამაშეებისთვის სტაბილური, პროგნოზირებადი და მიმზიდველი გარემოს შექმნა. არასატარიფო ბარიერების მოხსნა, საზღვრის კვეთის და ადმინისტრაციული პროცედურების შემსუბუქება. ხაზგასასმელია, რომ ამ ხრივ საქართველო მსოფლიოში ერთ-ერთი ყველაზე ლიბერალური სავაჭრო პოლიტიკის გამტარებელია. იმპორტირებული საქონლის 80%-ზე მეტი 0%-იანი იმპორტის გადასახადით იბეგრება. გამარტივებულია საბაჟო პროცედურები და მინიმალურია არასატარიფო ბარიერები. საქართველო როგორც მხოლოდ 3 და 7 მილიონიანი სამომხმარებლო ბაზარი შესაძლოა ვინმე მიიჩნიოს არა მიმზიდველად. თუმცა თუ შევხედავთ საქართველოს როგორც რეგიონალურ hubs, მნიშვნელოვან განსხვავებას მივიღებთ და ჩვენ
Sales market of 2.3 billion potential customers. It is a gateway not only for the Caucasus, Middle East, and larger markets. Along with the favorable investment environment, investors, will find preferential access to sales market with 2.3 billion potential customers, and it is enabled through the web of FTAs concluded by the country. This web includes the FTA with China. It is EU FTA. It is CIS FTA with Turkey and Ukraine as well. And of course, it is worth noting that the negotiations that are currently held for concluding the FTAs with India and Israel. Of course, respectively, Georgia, with its strategic location between Europe and Asia, is well positioned with its well-developed transport and customs infrastructure, pro-business policy, strong regional and overall trade relations. It has a tremendous potential to play a role of a hub and continue playing a significant role in connecting East and West and facilitating trade. In addition, it is crucial. It is critically important for the development of international trade and connectivity. In the global environment, when we develop the corridors between East and West, it is a necessity for international trade and facilitation. It is worth noting that significant steps have been made in the recent past in making the transit and logistic functions of Georgia far stronger in terms of infrastructure, upgrades, improvement of the legal framework, and integration of the international transport systems. In this context, Georgia is a reliable and significant partner in the region. Georgia is a member of TRASACA, Trans-European Caucasus Asian Transport Corridor, since its establishment. Besides, in 2016, we exceeded the Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation, CAREC, and we have been actively cooperating with every member state since then. Being the shortest road connecting Asia with Europe, Georgia is also engaged in various initiatives to develop new transport routes, for instance, Middle Corridor, Lapis Lazuli, and others. With the name of incentivized international shipment and forwarding, deepest trade and economic relations, great importance has been acquired to the sound operation of transport infrastructure in the region. On the background of these very challenges, we implement Baku-Tbilisi new railway, modernization of Georgian railway, construction of a highway, upgrades with significant investments, and of course, utilization of these roads. All of that is worth noting on the Black Sea coast in terms of modernization and construction of a new deep sea port. Herewith, I wish to underline the significance of engagement in the Trans-European network of transportation for the countries of Eastern Partnership for boosting the transport links with the EU. You may well be aware that these free trade agreements with China and EU, with which country stands out in the region, gives great opportunities to local and international investors. At the same time, it is nonetheless important to develop the energy corridors. You may well be aware that Georgia is trying to translate its geographic location into specific projects and play a role of an energy corridor. And therefore, we welcome and support South Gas Corridor, South Caucasus Trans-Adriatic pipeline, and Trans-Anatolian pipeline, which is also labeled as a new Silk Road for energy. And I cannot help touching upon a significant topic, which is advanced technologies, which within different panels will be discussed thoroughly. 21st century has been recognized as a digital era, and therefore advanced technologies are developing super fast and having already made a significant impact on the social, economic, and political transformation of the world. Nevertheless, serious challenges exist towards this end, as well with realistic risk of cybersecurity, human rights, jobs, and the impact on the job creation. The forum today allows for the conceptualization of the aforesaid, thereby sharing experience with each other. As a conclusion, let me say that this two-day-long event will be effective and efficient in terms of a platform for main discussions for our guests. I'm sure that the Silk Road Forum in Tbilisi will play a significant role in developing and implementing the prospects of the Silk Road, and our country and our region, in your eyes, will be positioned as a country of new opportunities and new achievements. I believe that we Georgians will deem this forum, and it will help us in delivering our unique mission to connect as a bridge Europe with Asia, where these two great civilizations meet each other. We are in Georgia, in a country where history and traditions are the foundation on the basis of which we built our future. Future of us all, future of Georgia, future of our region, and of course, primarily of well-being and prosperity of our citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let me thank you all for being here today. I wish you great success today and tomorrow, and great success personally to you and to your countries. Thank you.
Superstar economist, professor at New York
მაგლის
University.
ნოის ეკონომისტი პროფესორი ნიუ-იორკის უნივერსიტეტში რუბინი მაკრო ასოციაციის დოქტორი რეალისტი ექსპერტი გლობალური მაკროეკონომიკის ირენელი ებრაელებიშვილი დაბადებული თურქეთში გაზრდილი იტალიაში გლობალური მომთაბარე დოქტორ ნურიელ რუბინი ძვირფასო ბატონო პრემიერო, ძვირფასო პოლიტიკური გადაწყვეტილების მიღებებო, სხვადასხვა ქვეყნებიდან, დელეგატებო მსოფლიოს სხვადასხვა ნაწილიდან, ქალბატონებო, ბატონებო, ჩემთვის დიდი პატივი გახლავთ, რომ დღეს თქვენთან ერთად ვიყოფები ამ ლამაზ ქალაქში, ამ ლამაზ ქვეყანაში. პირველად ხდება, რომ მე საქართველოში ვიზიტით ვარ, მაგრამ მრავალი მიზეზით ვფიქრობ, რომ სახლში ვარ და
You know, I was born in Turkey, but my family is originally from Iran and Israel. And actually, my grandparents used to live in Tashkent, capital of Uzbekistan. And I visited many countries in the region, from Kazakhstan to Armenia to others. I come to Asia and visit China several times a year. I lived in Europe, where I grew up, and now I'm a citizen of the United States. So being here in the center of the new Silk Road is like feeling at home, because this is the cradle of many culture, religions, and civilizations. If you walk down the streets of the old city of Tbilisi, you're going to see not only churches of many denominations, but also mosques, synagogues. And this has been a country that's been a country of openness and tolerance for thousands of years. A good friend of mine, Parag Khanna, wrote a book recently this year saying the future is Asian. I would say the future is both European and Asian, Eurasian, because most of the global growth is going to occur in the next few decades from China, India, East South Asia, through Central Asia, the Caucasus, all the way to Central Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And this is becoming one of the most dynamic regions of the global economy. Greater connectivity, greater trade integration, greater contacts between people, cultures, and so on is going to lead to an improvement of the global economy. I just arrived last night from Washington, D.C., and I was there for the annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund and of the World Bank. And of course, the climate for the global economy in Washington looked like gloomy. 2 years ago, there was a global economic expansion. Growth was not only positive, but also accelerating. But today, it looks like the global economy is slowing down. 90% of global economies are actually having slower growth this year than the previous years. And there's a lots of potential tail risks in the global economy, but as I'll point out, there are also going to be lots of opportunities for the global economy, for this region, and for this country, if the right economic policies are continued. The concerns in the global economy are, of course, about several tail risks. One is the risk of protectionism. Unfortunately, I come from a country, United States, that used to be very open to trade and now is becoming more protectionist. And throughout the world, there has been a concern about potentially a trade and a technology war between the US and China and the damage that this is going to have for the global economy. There are other tail risks in the global economy. In Europe, where I was recently in London, of course, there was a concern about a hard Brexit. Hopefully, there will be a soft Brexit instead. And there is a number of geopolitical risks in the global economy, including also in the Middle East. Tension between Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United States could lead to a spike in oil prices that will be damaging of the global economy. I'm old enough to remember 1973, when there was the Yom Kippur War between Israel and the Arab states that led to a spike in oil prices, or 1979 Iranian Revolution that led to another spike in oil prices and a global recession. And even the 1990-91 recession, US and globally, was partly driven by Iraqi invasion of Kuwait that led to a spike in oil prices. So in the past few decades, shocks that are geopolitical in the Middle East has led to oil embargoes that led to economic recession and inflation. And I think that the biggest concern I have right now is that if you look at the history of the global economy for the last 40 years, since 1979, when there was the opening up of China with the reforms that were initiated by Deng Xiaoping, or 1989, when there was the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the integration of this country and many others in Central Eastern Europe in the global economy, the trend for the last 40 years was global integration, more trade in goods, in services, in capital, in labor, in technology, in information. And that led to economic success of many parts of the world, China, Central Eastern Europe, other emerging markets, and so on. And the threat we're facing today is the beginning of a process, maybe, if this trade friction are going to escalate, of a process instead of globalization, of deglobalization, of balkanization of the global economy, of fragmentation of global supply chains, of decoupling between US and China. I think that's a risk that we have to recognize and we have to work cooperatively to avoid. Maybe in spite of the gloom that we heard over the weekend in Washington, there are some good news. First good news is that US and China have reached a stage 1 agreement to try to avoid an escalation of the trade frictions, and hopefully the tariff that the US announced that had to be implemented in the next few months are not going to be implemented. Maybe this dialogue is going to continue and it's going to lead to another trade peace rather than a trade war. In Europe, it looks like the risk of a hard Brexit that will be damaging for both the United Kingdom and Europe has been reduced. Maybe this week the UK Parliament is going to approve this agreement for a soft exit of the United Kingdom from Europe. That's going to be good for Europe and it's going to be good for the global economy. And the tensions in the Middle East are rising, but short of an outright war that could lead to a spike in oil prices that will be damaging of the global economy. So while there are plenty of risk in the global economy, there are also opportunities. And I think that the lessons of the last 40 years is that the countries that integrate in the global economy tend to do well and succeed, and those that stay away from global integration remain behind. The success of China, the success of Georgia, and many other countries in Central and Eastern Europe has been due to openness to trade, to investment, governance, and private sector development. If you look in the 1950s, two countries like South and North Korea had the same per capita income. One opened up to the global economy, South Korea, and now is an advanced economy. The other one is still autarkic and is still in a situation of extreme poverty. So the lesson of the last 40 years is that greater openness integration makes you successful, developing private markets and private firms and private sector development. Of course, if you're a small open economy like this one, when there are volatility in the global economy, you can be affected by that economic volatility. It can also be affected, as we know, unfortunately, by political and geopolitical volatility in this region of the world. However, I think that the lesson of economic resilience is that all countries should remain open to trade, to investment, to private sector development, to greater regional and global integration. And if there are shocks coming from the global economy, you have to have sound economic policies, sound macroeconomic policies, and sound structural policies and reforms that are going to make you resilient and successful, even if there is shocks that come from the global economy. And in this context, I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about the economic reforms and the success that has occurred in this country, Georgia, that is in many ways an example of a country that is a top reformer in terms of both macro reforms and structural reform, and now top performer because it has achieved a growth rate of almost 5%, and with additional reforms, it could achieve even more economic success. Now, if you look at the macroeconomic stability, this country is an example of the kind of things you want to do. First of all, you want to have sound fiscal policy and public finance. You want to have a low budget deficits and low levels of stocks of public debt. And this country has been disciplined in achieving that by controlling spending, emphasizing investment and capital expenditures, and having a sound tax system that raises revenues. The budget deficit is low. The public debt as a share of GDP is low. This is also a country that many other countries has realized the importance of having an independent central bank committed to having low inflation. There is an inflation targeting regime, there is a flexible exchange rate, and whenever an external shock occurs, part of the shock absorbing mechanism is an adjustment of the exchange rate that stabilizes the external balance of the country. This country used to run a relatively large external deficit, but this external deficit is being shrinking, and most of the financing of these external deficits occurring through foreign direct investment. As we know, if you run a current account deficit, it's better to finance it with equity rather than debt, with long-term financing rather than short-term financing, and in local currency financing. And one of the features of foreign direct investment, this is equity investment rather than debt, is long-term and is in local currency, and therefore is a much more stable source of funding of external imbalances. And finally, this country, like many in the region now, has a sound financial system, banks that are properly supervised, regulated, with good capital, good liquidity, and low leverage. And this is the reason why rating agencies have been upgrading over the last few years the rating of the country, because there is a sound macroeconomic framework that is the fundamental source of economic stability. But of course, in addition to having a macroeconomic stability, you need to achieve also high productivity and high economic growth. And that implies having structural reform that increase the potential growth of the economy. And this country in the last few years has achieved a growth rate of close to 5%. And the growth could be even more than 5% if additional reforms are instituted, implemented. It's quite impressive to see how in the last 20 years, based on a number of measures of economic governance, this country has become ranked much higher. Today is ranked number 6 in the world by the World Bank in ease of doing business. It takes less than a day to create a firm. It's ranked number 16 in the world in the terms of the measures of overall economic freedom. It ranks very high in the world in terms of country that has low levels of corruption and bribery. It's number 6 in the world in measures of safety and index of crime. And more importantly, through a variety of tax reform, now is ranked number 3 by the World Bank in the world as having the least tax burden on business, the tax rate as a share of profits. And it ranks number 43 in the World Economic Forum measures of competitiveness. How this has been achieved? It's been achieved by economic reform that open up the economy, as was pointed out by the Prime Minister, having free trade agreements with almost 1/3 of the global population, with Europe, with China, with Turkey, with Ukraine, with the CIS country, with EFTA. And I know that one of the important goals of this government is to achieve also a free trade agreement with the United States, and I will be very much supportive when I go in Washington in supporting this kind of idea. This is also a country that is in a strategic location between East and West. It considers itself as a European country, given its history and its tradition. It is European, but is in the center of the old and the new Silk Road. Among many countries in this region, 8 of them are landlocked. This is one country that actually is not landlocked, is having ports in the Black Sea, and with the important investments in infrastructure could become a key link in the new Silk Road. And we are here today to talk about the new Silk Road initiative. It's also a country that has opened up itself to foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment is not just a source of capital, but as we know, is also transferring management skills, technology, and innovation. And is a country that has one of the largest amount of foreign direct investment as a share of GDP. Since 2014, foreign direct investment has averaged on overall 10% of GDP. FDI in the financial sector, in transport and communication, in energy, manufacturing, construction, and real estate. So there has been a remarkable transformation of this country, like many other in the region. In the last few decades, there has been a 75% fall in the degree of extreme poverty. There has been a 6% increase in life expectancy, and real per capita income after the transition has been increasing by 300%. That's why this country is called a top reformer and also a top reformer. Now, if I think about the future, and I think this is an important lesson, not just for this country, but also for many in the region, the progress that has been done can be improved in many dimensions that are important to achieve sustained economic growth in this country and this region of the world. Topic number one, of course, is the one of greater connectivity. Connectivity within countries, within the region, and between Europe and Asia. We know there are a number of initiatives, from the Belt Road Initiative to the Silk Road to local and regional one, to have more investments in the transportation infrastructure, highway, railroads, ports, in becoming this country and others important logistic hubs. But in addition to the real infrastructure, I think in a world of digital economy, the digital and the virtual infrastructure becomes as important as the real infrastructure. And that's where more has to be happening. There are going to be huge amounts of new investment important, not only in logistics and transportation, but also in energy. And not just in energy, but in clean energy. This is a country that can do a lot for clean energy with hydroelectric power, with wind power, with solar power. In addition to the physical infrastructure, however, I think that the lesson of the last few decades is that the human capital is as important as the physical capital and infrastructure capital. There are some countries in the world that have almost no natural resources. Take a country like Korea, or Japan, or Israel, or Singapore, and how they became high-income countries by investing in their own people. Human capital, skills, education. And in a world that is going to be a world of a knowledge economy, investing in education is key. And that's why I commend the objective of the government of this country to have an educational reform that's going to increase the skills of the labor force to be able to survive and thrive in a globalized economy and a digital economy. There are also important other things that have to happen in the labor market in this country and in this region. The labor force participation rate of women is still too low, and studies by the IMF, World Bank suggest that one of the ways of increasing productivity growth is to have women participate in the labor force. Of course, that implies having to have good childcare, having flexible hours. There are lots of things that have to be done to improve the labor force and the labor markets. This is a country that has had a brain drain and aging of population, and therefore having the right educational policies, the labor flexibility, investing into things that increase the job matching in the economy, having vocational training is going to increase the productivity of the labor force. The other things that are important, of course, are further improvements in governance. As I pointed out, by some measures, it's very easy to create a firm in this country. It's not as easy to wind it down. That's why the government wants to pass an insolvency law, pass a law for a resolution of banks and financial institutions that are fragile. And of course, you need also further improvements in judicial reform in order to have more transparency and more accountability. Now, in addition to all of these things, I think it's key for every country in the region to have also greater economic diversification. This country has attracted a lot of investment, foreign direct investment, but is still maybe too specialized in a small set of exports of goods and services. Or other countries in the region tend to be commodity exporters. And as we know, in good times where oil and commodity prices are higher, that's good, but then you're subject to volatility. So you need more export diversification, a broader range of economic activity. And as I pointed out, the future of the global economy is one where most of the productivity growth is going to occur through artificial intelligence, robotic, automation, innovation, and knowledge and economy. And for that one, you need physical capital, infrastructure capital, and the right types of skills of the labor force to be able to be successful in this global economy. I will make also two final observations. While the public sector and public investment and sound public policy have a key role to play in economic development, there is also a key complementary role of the private sector. That role of the private sector is key, and sometimes in conjunction with the public sector. That's why private-public partnerships are important, to have public and private investment. That's why it's important to have capital markets that work, that can channel savings going from savers to the right types of investment. You need to have policies that develop startups and small and medium-sized enterprises that are the core of economic growth. The final point I'll make is the following one. Unfortunately, today, we're facing throughout the world a backlash against trade, against globalization, against migration, against supranational authorities, even against technological innovation that tend to be skill bias and capital-intensive and labor-saving. However, we have to realize that unless we make the global growth inclusive, unless we make the global growth more sustainable, this backlash is going to continue. So the challenge that we all face is to have more integration, more globalization, more economic, trade, and financial links, but in a way in which we are going to provide to the new generations the tool to survive and succeed in this global digital economy. And I think that the kind of economic reforms that this country is making, the kind of reforms that are made in this region of the world, and the initiatives of the Silk Road are going to lead to economic success protracted for this region of the world and for the global economy. Thank you very much for your attention.
We're going to now continue the dialogue that was started with the speech of the Prime Minister and my remarks about the benefits of connectivity and of integration. And I'm honored that I'm going to be moderating a panel with a series of distinguished guests. I'm going to briefly introduce each one of these guests, and they're going to come here to the panel, and we're going to start the conversation. The first one I would like to introduce is Ms. Maya Skitishvili, who is the Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Regional Development and Infrastructure of Georgia. She has been overseeing the major infrastructure and regional development project and is a great supporter of cross-regional connectivity enhancement. And she has over 20 years of managerial experience in construction, real estate development, logistic, project management, aviation sectors from a number of private corporate groups and holdings. Thank you for joining us. The second speaker is Mr. Tigran Avignan, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Armenia since May 2018. Is one of the main leaders of the Armenian Velvet Revolution of 2018. Previously, he was successfully managing IT companies. Is currently coordinating government activities in the spheres of economic development, social policy, healthcare, education, infrastructure, and ICT, and he leads a process of comprehensive public administration reform. The third speaker is Mr. Elyor Ganev, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Uzbekistan. He is one of the founders of the Traseka program, and he was the first to organize multimodal transportation along the corridor of Uzbekistan, South Caucasus, and Europe. He was previously Minister of Foreign Trade in the early 1990s, and he created a chain of logistics centers, and is also the initiator of the transportation up to 1 million tons of export cargo of Uzbekistan through the port of Poti. Thank you for joining us as well. We have also two more speakers. One is Mr. Liu Hui. He has been appointed this year, 2019, by the People's Republic of China as the government special envoy in the Eurasia region. He has extensive experience in diplomacy, having served at different positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, including Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2008-2009. And over the past 10 years, he served as an ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to the Russian Federation. The final speaker is Mr. Xixin Chen. He is the Vice President of the Asian Development Bank since 2018 and is responsible for operations in 17 countries in Central, West, and South Asia region. He has previously held senior position in the Ministry of Finance of the People's Republic of China and has been on the boards of directors of the New Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the World Bank. He has been also the World Bank Executive Director for the PRC. So thank you to all of you for being here today. There is a lot to be discussed about economic integration in this region, about infrastructure, about greater connectivity. And I will start, first of all, with a question that I'm going to address to each one of you, starting with the representative from Georgia. And the first question I would like to ask you is the one of, it's here, what are the key areas and projects you prioritize for strengthening the connectivity and further integrating your country in the global economy? But just before we start the comment, I've been also told that we would like to have an interactive dialogue with the audience, and therefore there is a website, Slido, where you can actually participate in a poll and answer a question. And the question you're going to be asked to answer is whether policy harmonization among the Silk Road country is necessary for connectivity. So feel free to go online and click and give your answer, and after you've provided the answer at the end of the panel, we're going to have the results of this poll and we'll discuss it. But let me start with you, Minister, and how you address these questions.
Thank you. First of all, let me to greet all of you here in Georgia. It's a country which is offering a lot to everyone who wish to cooperate with Georgia and to do business in Georgia, and of course to cooperate with each other through Georgia. And when we're talking about importance of the initiative of the New Silk Road and importance of this type of partnership, of course we, from our side, are contributing to the building of New Silk Road and to building of the partnership between the countries. It's difficult to add anything to the opening remarks of the Prime Minister and our moderator today, but still let me emphasize on some of the important projects. First of all, you've heard that we became part of the European extended transportation network, TNT network, which is entailing about 18 projects with a total value of 3.4 billion euro, which is going to be implemented in Georgia. And we are currently building new roads, part of the East-West Highway, which will connect our countries much faster with more reliable and secure connections. At the same time, we are of course investing in the modernization of our existing railway connections and in the railway, building also our part of very important railway connection between Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey. And of course, we are also investing in the logistic infrastructure throughout the country. Of course, it's the Black Sea with existing ports, modernization and enlargement of the existing ports, and of course, building new deep sea water port in Anaklia, which we think that with connection of all that infrastructure and building and tightening all this infrastructure together will give Georgia another opportunity to serve much better the needs of the Silk Road. And of course, for us, when we're talking about the connectivity and about the priorities of Georgian connectivity, it's not just a physical infrastructure, as was mentioned today, but connectivity, it's also our contribution to more open and more liberal economy, more connections between the countries of the regions, and by having all these free trade agreements, by having with the countries of the closer and broader regions, by having also very liberal, very open, very business-friendly, very tolerant economy and culture of Georgia, we feel that we can contribute to the more openness, more better integration, and also removing all the obstacles that the countries may have in building closer ties. So maybe this is the main remarks, and I believe that during the day, these 2 days, of course, we'll hear much more about what Georgia can offer to all of you, as well as how we can share the knowledge and information with each other as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubini. I would like to thank our Georgian partners for this fantastic event in this beautiful venue. And well, just to address the question, I would probably say that as a landlocked country with practically 4 borders and 2 open borders, of course, the road is one of the most important infrastructures that we develop currently. We have the north-south corridor road, which may give the opportunity to have the shortest road from the port of Bandar Abbas of Iran to the ports of Georgia. And currently we're in the phase of implementation of this north-south corridor, which is again in line with the whole Silk Road initiative. Of course, energy is also another area where connectivity is very important, and currently we're building the high voltage networks, the 3rd line with Iran, and we're building also the high voltage network with Georgia as well, with a back-to-back station, which will give the opportunity to work asynchronized as we're a part of a system with Iran, and Georgia is a part of a system in terms of electricity with Russia. So basically we have a bit of different systems, and we will have the back-to-back to work asynchronized. Other areas, of course, aviation. And aviation for the landlocked country is of utmost importance, and we have been working on setting up some new routes to Yerevan and to Gyumri, other airport that we have. And currently we have achieved several agreements with the biggest European aviation company, Ryanair, which is a budget company, of course, but basically it drives a lot of routes, it drives a lot of tourists, it drives a lot of also outgoing tourists from the country as well. So aviation is, of course, another priority. Armenia is a member of Eurasian Economic Union, which is a market of 180 million consumers and of a GDP of 1.8 billion. And basically, so we're in that union with Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. And Eurasian Union has, of course, free trade agreements with some other countries as well, like Singapore, like Vietnam. We have preferential agreement with Iran. And so the list is enhancing. And of course, the trade side of connectivity is also very important. And basically, we as a country that is practically a member of the Eurasian Union and is, of course, very interested in the development that we see in Georgia, and we congratulate our partners with all the achievements they're having. And basically, I think we're also on the same road. And currently, we're also enhancing our trade with some other countries, and we're also are having great conversation with our Georgian partners regarding our bilateral relations. And probably this can be a great thing that we can achieve when we have the potential of the Eurasian, and by the way, Armenia also has the GSP and GSP Plus regimes with European Union. And basically, we see a lot of potential with the opportunities that are created in Georgia and the opportunities that are created in Armenia, and we want to be as connected and as linked as possible with our friends. Thank you.
I'll now ask Minister Ganiev.
Спасибо большое. Прежде всего, я хочу от имени правительства Республики Узбекистан поблагодарить правительство Грузии, лично премьер-министра, за традиционно прекрасную организацию настоящего форума, который уже становится традиционным, и, конечно, за то искреннее гостеприимство, которое оказывается всем участникам этого форума. Я хотел бы поддержать уважаемого Георгия Зауровича в том, что укрепление экономической, культурной, гуманитарной взаимосоставляющей нашего сотрудничества является основной точкой устойчивого развития и совместного процветания всех стран на обширном пространстве Великого Шелкового пути, древнего Великого Шелкового пути, который сегодня становится не менее актуальным. Современный Узбекистан уверенно продвигается по пути реформ. Я бы назвал эти реформы кардинальными. Если говорить коротко, то их можно охарактеризовать одним словом — либерализация. В рамках стратегии действий по 5 приоритетным направлениям осуществляется реформа, формируется открытая экономика, свободная конкуренция, сокращается присутствие государства в экономике, создан максимально благоприятный деловой инвестиционный климат. Мы принимаем активные меры по либерализации внешнеторговой политики, возобновили процесс вступления в ВТО, который сегодня ведется очень активно. Введена частная собственность на землю, сняты все ограничения на репатриацию прибыли, конвертацию национальной валюты, создан институт омбудсмена, бизнес-омбудсмена, защищающий права инвесторов и предпринимателей. Что очень важно, в этом году был принят закон о государственном частном партнерстве, который уже дает конкретные результаты. Надо сказать, что принятые меры, проведенные реформы уже дают свои результаты. За последние 2 года число вновь созданных предприятий с иностранными инвестициями увеличилось до 10 тысяч. Впервые в истории Узбекистана доля инвестиций в ВВП превысила 33%. В этом году мы ожидаем двукратный рост освоения прямых иностранных инвестиций, не менее чем 7 миллиардов долларов против 2,8 миллиардов долларов в 2018 году. международные рейтинговые агентства присвоили Узбекистане суверенный рейтинг как стабильный. В системе рейтингов Мирового банка Doing Business Узбекистан несколько раз повысил свои позиции. ОСР также повысил рейтинг Узбекистана до 5-й категории. И все это является признанием тех реформ, которые сегодня уже осуществлены в Узбекистане. Надо сказать, что в числе наших главных приоритетов дальнейшее совершенствование инвестиционного климата, сокращение административных барьеров, развитие международных транспортных коридоров инфраструктуры, создание производств продукции с высокой добавленной стоимостью. В прошлом году мы начали перевозки грузов по маршруту Андижан-Ош-Кашгар-Лянь-Нюньгань. Формируется железнодорожный коридор Китай-Кыргызстан-Узбекистан. Новым фактором межрегионального взаимодействия является запуск железной дороги Баку-Тбилиси-Карс и значительное укрепление инфраструктуры морских портов региона. Это открывает новые возможности для формирования субрегионального транспортного коридора Китай, Центральная Азия, Кавказ, Европа. Мы надеемся на то, что этот коридор сумеет создать абсолютно новые условия на Великом Шелковом пути. Свое выступление я хочу закончить очень известной грузинской поговоркой: для того, чтобы раскрыть большие паруса, нужен сильный ветер. Уверен, что на базе Тбилисского форума, на основе взаимовыгодного сотрудничества мы полнее раскроем потенциал для устойчивого развития.
So for whole region of the Silk Road. Thank you very much.
Mr. Liu Hui, please, you have the mic.
好，谢谢主席先生。刚才加哈利亚总理和乔治主席在自己的发言当中
Minister so has mentioned many interesting issues. Dear guests, for me it's a great honor to be here in a very important hub of the Silk Road, so one of the countries which responded to Xi Jinping's initiative, the president. So thank you very much for conducting very good forum this year. President Xi Jinping pushed forward the initiative One Belt, One Road, so to develop more interconnectivity, so to push forward the collaboration and to achieve the common development. Over the last 6 years, and in according to the principles of long-term negotiations, in collaboration with all the 160 countries, I would like to mention that by joint efforts, we have the interconnected network with 6 corridors, so interconnected routes and corridors. So the second forum in China, so One Road, One Belt, was held, which further strengthened the plans of the multiple collaboration, multifaceted collaboration. Georgia is very actively involved in these processes. It's very important that between China and Georgia was signed off and entered into force the free trade agreement. So this is the first free trade agreement signed off in our region. Over the last year, the trade turnover between our country exceeded $1 billion, and in the first half of this year it reached 900 million. So the special economic zone created by Chinese initiative and industrial parks are working very successfully. by Chinese companies' investments. Many companies, enterprises are working in many directions. For example, the construction of roads, or tunnels, electricity, power stations construction. We know that Georgia is the shortest route between Asia and Europe. I am assured that, and I do trust that today's forum will be very important. This is a very high-level forum which will entail the high resonance by the societies and the governments. So, which means exactly the fact and is the manifestation of the Silk Road inspiration. So we hope that the companies participating in this forum and the representative government will actively participate in negotiations, will create and will build better collaboration, and I'm hopeful that this forum will be yielding a lot of success, especially in the in terms of the deepening of trade economic relations. In Georgia, we have so many private and public Chinese companies that are successfully working, which makes me quite elated. I have a desire, and I wish very much that the Georgian government to conduct in China the forum, with the goal to attract more investments for Georgia from China. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'm a great honor to be able to participate this forum. It's excellent. So, okay.
Yes.
It's not working. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. So thanks for the Georgia government to host this one, excellent one. Like Professor Rubini, I also just came back from Washington, D.C., attend the World Bank and IMF annual meeting. So there I met with the senior management of the IMF, World Bank, IFC, AIIB, and also EBRD. We had a lot of discussions. But one of the major one is the regional cooperation, and also this region. The great sense there is that we need to work together. So like this question asked, we need to work on the lots of issues, and also the harmony policy and joint hands would be most important. So one thing we actually shared is like the proverb is one honeybee cannot produce honey actually. One grain of rice actually cannot make the meal. So most important for MDB like ADB, World Bank, we join together is the cooperation. So I like first of all emphasize how important. Okay. Sorry, yeah. So I like to emphasize that how important is that the cooperation would be for the future of the region here. To address this session, I like to add my panel colleagues' opinion. 4 things I think it's extremely important. The first one is the connectivity. So for this region, because of some nature of the economic structure, economic nature, like some country small size, some, as my colleague mentioned, is landlocked, some is double landlocked. Travel here, transportation, the cost and the length relatively higher and longer than other area. And also the geographic structure here is in the middle of everywhere. So connectivity would be extremely important for this region. So I like to echo that and highlight it. Actually, the CARIC, the Central Asia Regional Cooperation, this mechanisms since it started, has already invested 35 billion US dollar in this region. So I think with the sense of cooperation in the future, we can try to do more, to invest more, to enhance the connectivities in many, many dimensions. So this is the first thing I'd like to emphasize. The second thing is not only the fiscal infrastructure, but also the soft side. So soft side is also very much important because if this area not be able to enhance its kind of shortage and barriers for our growth. So I'd like to see this equally important as the fiscal side of infrastructure, not to mention many, many areas like systems, like policies, like human capitals. But one example, like trade facilitation. So the customs services procedure, if it is too long, and also like the border control, and tariff, non-tariff. So those of many issues cannot be solved, then the trade facilitation would be the problem. Here, like I like to say, Georgia did a very good job. You know, the doing business ranking is very, very high. It's 6 places. I used to involved in China back home. About these issues. It's really hard. It's so many reforms related. So I think this is a kind of a dimension we can further cooperate to work on that. The third area I want to touch upon a little bit is knowledge cooperation. We work on the transport corridor, economic corridor, but I like to emphasize, and also should be knowledge corridor as well. So many colleges can be shared, like knowledge of how to attract the tourism, how to get more jobbers, specifically help the youth and the women, and also how to use the technologies. Now there's a lot of technology booming. So this is an area I think we are going to do that. This afternoon, Calicut Institute is going to host a dedicated session, so I think this will be very much interesting. Lastly, the development partner cooperation, as I at the beginning mentioned that the member countries here work very closely with development partner. So we also like to take some leader example to join hands, work in this area. Not only for ourselves, we would like to emphasize like co-financing, leverage the private sector. So all the efforts together, join hands here. So I think this is maybe also critical in the future. With that, I stop here. Thank you very much.
After this first round of questions, I would like to ask specific questions to each one of the panelists, and I'm going to start with you, Vice Prime Minister of Georgia, as the host country. And the first specific question I would like to ask you is, from Georgia's perspective, how does connectivity impact economic growth and stability in this region, and what kind of collaboration is needed in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, we actually had the opportunity to listen from both Prime Minister and yourself what the results were achieved by Georgia during these years. And when we are talking also about economic growth, you mentioned in your opening remarks that there are unfortunately many countries that are not growing, the economies of which are not growing. So actually, happily, Georgia, because of all the reforms that we are doing, both in the physical connectivity and also, as mentioned, in the soft areas like policy areas, public finance management, macro stability, governance, all the reforms, all the agendas that we are doing actually provides us with the opportunity to have very stable growth, about 5%, as you mentioned, annually. And at the same time, of course, it's also the growth which gives us opportunity to build more resilient, more stable economy, and of course bring more wealth to our population. When we're talking about these opportunities that our openness and our liberal policy and connectivity gave us, actually we can see and measure it in figures. We have also growth in FDIs. Actually, the last year was one of the best years, having 1.3 billion in FDI. We also have very high growth figures, about 17% or up to 10 to 17% in various areas like transport, trade, financial sector, and so on. And of course, at the same time, when we are talking about the connectivity, it also helps Georgia as well to increase its own exports. For instance, just during this year, our exports increased by 13%. So this is the opportunities which are given by openness and by better integration and better connectivity. And of course, it's, as we mentioned before, it's due to physical connectivity, due to the position of Georgia as a corridor, our contribution to both the energy sector and any sectors that are constituting the part of the integration as a corridor. As about the cooperation, of course, when we're talking about the connectivity, as already mentioned, it's also about the procedures, it's about the removing the administrative barriers, it's about doing business together easily and with less barriers, and of course it's about stability and political stability as well. And in this particular case, Georgia is also shows itself for the decades as a very stable and reliable partner with very stable Euro-Atlantic integration, with very stable policies. And we think that in that field we can also offer ourselves as a role model in the region as well. Regarding the more collaboration, of course, we are talking about digital environment, digital economy, and of course in that areas, of course, I also would like to echo what already my colleague, our guest from ADB said, that here we are talking about the sharing the knowledge in digital area as well, and all those e-services, e-commerce, e-logistics. Of course, it's also part of what we can do together in order to find more opportunities.
Thank you. My next question is to the Deputy Prime Minister of Armenia. You have been one of the leaders of your Velvet Revolution, and I would like to ask you, how has this revolution affected the economic development of your country? Has Armenia suffered any losses, or have you managed to succeed economically after these political changes?
Thank you. If I'm very precise, the impact of the Velvet Revolution on the economy was absolutely positive. So during the months of April, May last year, we had protests all over the country, and practically a lot of people were not working during that time. Last year we had elections in capitals, municipality, we had the elections of the National Assembly, we had several elections of Prime Minister of the country, and basically throughout these political fluctuations, we closed the year with 5.2% of GDP growth. The major shift, I believe, is what the general trust towards the new government was much higher than it was previously, and that is the main driving force of this growth and economic stability. This year we have even higher growth rates. We have around 7% of economic activity during the half of the year, and currently we're thinking to have even more, I believe, by the end of the year. So the precise answer is the impact was absolutely positive. So we have taken significant measures against corruption, and we're fighting corruption on the institutional basis. We're creating new institutions that will act in this field, and I think this is also a very positive process that is happening in the country. And just to also emphasize some positive changes of this growth becoming more inclusive, and because we also had growth in the previous years, but the growth was not very inclusive, and the current government's strategy is more built on the inclusive growth model, which practically means more infrastructure and public investments in infrastructure. We have a tremendous number of roads built during 2018 and 2019. It is much more importance given to the educational sector and, of course, to healthcare, which means human capital development, which we believe we are rich with, and practically we're working on that human capital. Just to give you a couple of numbers, our information and communication technology sector was growing for about 28% during the last 8 years, and basically this is also, of course, a major heritage that we got from the Soviet Union, and we're currently continuing to work on the human capital, putting some more emphasis on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question will be for the Deputy Prime Minister of Uzbekistan, Mr. Ganiev. You were a participant of the previous version of this forum, occurred in 2017, Tbilisi Silk Forum, and I'd like you to maybe address the question of what have been the results of this greater degree of cooperation in the trade, economic, scientific, technical, cultural, and also humanitarian area between your countries and the countries in the South Caucasus over the past 2 years. How would you assess this development of this cooperation? Thanks.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to single out that, namely, the participation in the conference of 2017 gave a head start of the active collaboration between Uzbekistan and Georgia. So if we speak about concrete results, the trade turnover, commodity turnover increased by 30% over the last years, but we quite well comprehend that this is not the final threshold. So the joint enterprises, joint projects number increased. So the key of our collaboration between Uzbekistan and the Central Asian and Caucasus region countries, the key direction is the transport sector for us, the formation of the reliable and efficient transport corridors are of importance, because we have heard the fact that many countries are landlocked. Uzbekistan is such a country, so we are a double-locked country, and all our neighboring countries does not have the access to sea, but we have very active investment policy. We have quick economic growth, like 6% per year. So the formation of the export direction of our economy requires serious measures to shape up the efficient transport corridors. And in the course of the previous conference, within the framework of the discussion of the Project One Belt, One Road, we have started pushing forward the creation of the transport corridor China, Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe. So as we deem, this is the corridor which gives interconnectivity between the countries. So will contribute into the revival of the old Silk Road and will play a serious role in development of the economies of every country. And that's why the route for Georgia, which is a very important country for transit, has a huge transit potential. So the using of the cargo which will be going through Georgia will yield serious economic efficiency, and one of the direction we consider important. This is the learning of the Georgian experience. So in many issues, we realize the reforms in our country which were carried out in Georgia, but we have our own way, and one of the directions for Georgia and the result Georgia has is the tourism sector. It's a unique result. So Uzbekistan is the country possessing high touristic potential. We would like more collaboration in terms of the learning Georgian experience and using our common opportunities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, my next question is for Mr. Liu Hui, and I would like to ask him how do you see the role of Georgia in the Belt and Road Initiative? Thanks.
So Georgia possesses unique geographic location. This is very important issue and very important element by which she can develop her role in One Belt, One Road initiative. I have arrived to Georgia for the first time, as the Chinese embassy told me. In Georgia, very important transformation occurred over the last several years, and I think that the Georgian people uses the talent, the traditional experience to develop own economy, own trade. So it's very important that to have very good political course, so good regulations, so to the end to attract more direct foreign investments. So we have many Chinese companies operating in Georgia, many fields, which makes me very delighted. Georgia is creating the shortest route between Asia and Europe. That's very important. And China, by all means, calls on the Chinese companies to be more actively involved, to arrive to Georgia, to use this unique transport potential of Georgia. As per connectivity issue, so it's very important to have better communication in terms of interconnectivity and regulations. So with the purpose that the countries along One Belt, One Road in a harmonious and synchronized manner to conduct the economic development strategies, to simultaneously define big directions of collaboration and jointly to carry out the large-scale connectivity projects. So I think that Georgia possesses huge potential in its regards, and many countries in the region. And China will go on with calling upon the Chinese companies to arrive to Georgia, to put in investments, to use the Georgia's unique transport and other potential. So by all means, we can do a lot of things for this. Thank you.
I would like now to ask Mr. Chen of the ADB the following question. In your initial remarks, you referred to both physical capital or hard infrastructure as well as soft capital and soft measures that are needed to promote regional cooperation. Could you please tell us what the ADB is doing to help achieve these goals in these regions? What are the key challenges and what do you see these regions' prospects going forward? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the ADB has the goal of, together with the SDGs, we work on the prosperity and resilient, inclusive, and sustainable development. So this is the totally idea, our goals. But in this region, I think it's quite unique. So we have to focus on the specific situations here. I think many aspects would be there. Poverty is still there, and environmental issues, climate change, and also some education disasters, so those areas as well. And also the governance, as the professor mentioned earlier. Beyond that, we also have the issue of the livable city, because urbanization here is also rapidly developed, and also regional cooperation is a key of here. So around that, I think we have the fiscal investment here, heavily fiscal investment. So and also promote character cooperation with each other through character mechanism, and also. In talking about the fiscal, lots of flagship project and also small projects as well. Regarding the flagship, like North-South corridor in Armenia, like East-West highway, Georgia, and also like TAPI power network. So this is also across many countries, and also TAPI gas pipeline. And also the checkpoint across the border of Afghanistan, Armenia, Georgia, Pakistan, Tajikistan, as well as other neighbor countries. So those efforts. So we work on the transportation, work on the energy. In the energy sector specifically, the renewable energy is also very critical. Regarding the soft, I think the soft side is very, very much important. So system is the public management system, because the economy is in the transition. So this is the area. Human capital, and also area like I mentioned, the trade facilitation, tourism. So many areas we are focused on that. So this is, I think, we tried very hard. The challenges there, but we have the hope in sense of the cooperation. Thank you.
I'd like now to go to a second round of specific questions, but before I do that, I would like to remind you all that you can participate in this poll online, so go to the Slido website and please give your answer to the poll question. Thank you. In the second round, I'd like to start again with the Deputy Prime Minister of Georgia, and I would like to ask you specifically, how do you see the role of Georgia in strengthening the corridor? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, when we're talking about what Georgia can do to contribute to the strengthening of the corridor, we are, as already mentioned, investing in upgrading our physical infrastructure in order to provide safe and reliable transportation network for all participants of the corridor. So should it be the road, rail, or our port infrastructure. We are, of course, investing in the energy corridors and also providing them with a safe and reliable energy interaction and energy connectivity. Of course, we are investing in the human capital and knowledge sharing along the corridor. And we are developing also the corridors itself, I mean, mainly the relations and interactions between our neighboring countries and countries along the corridors in order to have free barriers relations, less procedures. We are talking about and having a lot of agreements with all our neighboring countries, which are contributing to the less tariffs through setting up the through fares along the corridor, less interactions between for the cargo holders and those who use the corridor, including one-stop principle. We are also providing the digital connection between the countries in the corridor, sharing of the information, which also could contribute to making the corridor easy to use. And of course, once again, we are talking about utilizing Georgia's unique position of having free trade agreements both with China and the DCFTA, and of course with the countries of CIS, Turkey, EFTA countries. And by all these free trade regimes, so we are also offering Georgia as a place for investments where the investor can reach the market of 2.3 billion. So this is everything with the regulations, policies, stability, and very intensive investments in the physical and soft infrastructure. It's what Georgia can do to serve the corridor and contribute to its development. Thank you.
I'd like to ask next the Deputy Prime Minister of Armenia. The digital era is affecting everything and brings tremendous changes to the way we think about governance and development. In your view, what are the main challenges that your country, Armenia, is facing, and what are the opportunities you see so that you can integrate your country in the global value chains and in this global digital economy? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I think that the main challenge is related to the digital era of our country is common as to all of the countries. And I think the main challenge is the fear about the new future tools that can even, like they say, the AI can even take our creative jobs. And basically this has been a debate throughout all the centuries, starting from the first industrial revolution, when people thought that the machinery will take their jobs. But what had happened in real life, it created new horizons for the people and new jobs for the people. And basically that is another stage of job creation that is happening now. What I think the opportunity is, of course, is in terms of the government. So it is, of course, the public services that will be produced digitally, and these are, of course, the e-economy tools that are pretty disruptive, and most of the central banks, I believe, are pretty nervous about the crypto assets, and they will be nervous in the coming years for sure. But basically, what these new tools and these new technologies create is, of course, opportunities. And if we are conscious and if we are careful with them, we absolutely can create better opportunities for all of our countries and create new and completely new types of jobs throughout the world. Not only in our countries, but this will be a global trend. Thank you.
My next question is for Deputy Prime Minister of Uzbekistan, Mr. Ganiev. As you know, your country is a landlocked country that doesn't have direct free access to international maritime communications. You have worked in a number of senior positions in your government, Minister of Trade, Foreign Affairs, and now DPM. So I would like to ask you, what is the role that could the seaports of Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey play in the development of interregional transport interconnectedness, and what type of collaboration you think is needed to ensure this connectivity is so important for your country? Thanks.
As I have said, this is a very important issue for us because the closest port from Uzbekistan is port of Plati, and of course we are interested in the fact that all the countries of the region, as well as our close partners, our neighbors, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Turkey, to set up good conditions that the transit corridor to be working efficiently. In this regard, a huge importance is attached to the commissioning of the railroad Baku-Tbilisi-Kars, so with the outreach to the Turkish railroads, so European railroads, so very good potential we also see in the using of ports of Georgia, so Anaklia, Newport, Poti Batumian, Newport, Anaklia over the last year. So the countries of the region seriously developed their transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure. So in the region of the Central Asia, we have created totally new conditions in terms of the elevation of, in terms of the demolition of all the barriers on the border. So we created the common energy market. Our countries like Turkmenistan built totally new port, Turkmenbashi, so Kurek port in Kazakhstan, so Almaty in Azerbaijan, Poti port in Georgia is developing quickly. So together we have to use the existing infrastructure on our part. We are developing the railroad corridor from China via Kyrgyzstan to Central Asia to Uzbekistan. It all gives us the opportunity on the maximum level to use this huge transit potential and in real to reinstate the old Silk Road for our economy that has the export vector. This is so vital. Thank you.
I would like now to ask Mr. Liu Hui, could you please provide more information about the second China Import Expo? Thanks.
好，中国的第2届进口博览会将于今年的11月5号到10号在中国。
For your question, so import, export, so exhibition will be conducted in Shanghai in October. This is very important platform and the first important platform and the exhibition all over the world which is oriented at import. And this is very good manifestation how China would like to develop her own market. As far as we know, last year the import-export first exhibition occurred, so over 170 countries participated in this exhibition, in this fair. So serious transactions were concluded. So the amount of one transaction could have reached $50 billion. And I think that this is a very important platform which will connect many companies. And we are in hope that Georgia will be actively involved in the second fair, in the second exhibition, and will use this opportunity to further develop trade economic relationship between us. As I know, China, national, main TV, while highlighting this fair, they spoke about Georgian wine, which had a positive resonance by the Chinese public. So, the mentioning of Georgian wine. So that means that the Chinese people, they know Georgia, they know Georgian wine, and on this fair, Georgia should be presented. So Georgia arrives with its products to many exhibitions and fairs, and this is assisting the Chinese people to better know Georgia and to further deepen its knowledge regarding Georgia, Georgian products, Georgian people, and this is assisting the relationship between our countries.
I would like now to ask Mr. Chen, what do you think is the role of the international financial institutions in achieving sustainable connectivity along the Silk Road countries, please?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is quite a broad question. I do see this region has already been picking up. System is transitioning, infrastructure is gradually getting there, and also the whole system is in a way of reforming. So the whole region will have a very brilliant future. Several areas, I think maybe this is our expectation. The first is in the future there will be a higher level of infrastructure connectivity. So this is what we work with the the member country put lots of efforts there. So I think this is going to be approved a lot. The second area, I think it's easy of doing business. So this is also related to not only public investment, but also private sector as well. So this is going to be very, very key area. So I think the policy reform to how to enable the environment would be the key. Third area related to the easy to access, like education, energy. So lots of things we need to work on that. So then will be like an easy way for all of the citizens. Lastly, I want to, but not least, I want to mention is the job creations. So more job opportunities for all, for men, for women, for youth as well. So then there will be needed a lot of like education, like skill, training, like knowledge exchange, so all of the there as well. And also tourism development also will boost a lot of opportunities for the job creation. So with that, I think I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're at the point where we could probably see the results of the poll that you all participated, and the question was, is the policy harmonization among Silk Road countries necessary for connectivity? And I don't know if the results can be shown on the screen, and then I'll give a chance to the panel members maybe to make in 1 minute, each one of you, brief comment on that. I was looking online if I get the results right. The answer was that 95% of you said yes to the question, yes, that policy harmonization among Silk Road countries is necessary for connectivity. Only 5% said no, but 95% overwhelming, actually 94%. Okay, so maybe before we wrap up, maybe each one of you can, for a minute, say something about what the answer from the audience about this question says about this important topic, starting with you.
It's interesting to know the arguments of the 6%. First of all, why no? And of course, my answer would be also yes, that policy harmonization among the Silk Road countries, of course, will change dramatically the way how the Silk Road can work. And the policy harmonization can make the Silk Road one initiative, and not just the countries which are located along the Silk Road, but can change the Silk Road initiative to really real integration between these countries, between the economies of these countries, and contribute to the wealth and economic development of the whole countries along the corridor.
Yeah. Please.
Well, each and every major project that is being built in the territories of each and every country should have at least economic feasibility. For instance, we're putting much emphasis on the renewable energy, and we had the biggest project in the region of 55 megawatts of solar panels. And by the way, Uzbekistan has taken the lead. They're building 100 megawatts, and hopefully we'll take the lead the next year. We'll be building around 300 plus megawatts of solars. But basically, if we're building that, where are we going to take this energy? And that is, of course, the infrastructure that is being developed with Georgia, that is being developed with Iran. And this is, of course, an example where we need synchronization of our policies. And this is crucial for the countries of the Silk Road, because we need to deal in the same logics when we're talking about these mega projects, when we're talking about logistical infrastructure, when we're talking about even digital infrastructure. And I believe that the policy harmonization is a crucial and vital thing to do. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Gagne.
Ну, собственно говоря, все, что я сегодня говорил.
I would like one more time to reaffirm that the creation of the fund and institutionalization of the ancient Great Silk Road for Uzbekistan is a very important process, because Uzbekistan from the ancient times with the ancient towns, Samarkand, Bukhara and Khiva was the center of the Great Silk Road. And today we have many regional, inter-regional projects which I have mentioned, and I think that the creation of this instrument will be very positive. I say yes to the question.
Mr. Wei.
So harmonization between the policies and regulations is very important. This is the precursor and the warranty that so the tempo of the development of one belt, one road, so their economies in every field. So this is the premise of everything, that these countries will be interconnected with positive dynamism. As we know, Georgia and China signed off the economic belt memorandum, and I think that by signing off of such a document, we can achieve further results, and it requires harmonization and synchronization between the countries.
Yeah, thank you. I actually have no problem of that 94%, so I think it's a majority. But I want to understand a little bit more about why the 6%. So this is something behind. I guess maybe some wonder of how we are going to reach there. Maybe policy harmonizations, a lot of challenges. So I think this is maybe a reason. So as the development partner, we would like to work more with the governments, with the members together to enhance the cooperation, to work together to promote the policy harmonization. So I think maybe in the future the 6% will be removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we wrap up this session, I was asked to try to maybe figure out what were the main points that came from this session. And it's hard to summarize, but I'd like to make the following observation. I think that the objective is to achieve a greater economic success, growth, productivity, and welfare, both at the national and the regional and, of course, global level. And I think that probably there was a consensus that there are three things that are important. First thing that is important is to have a greater regional integration. That implies more integration, more connectivity, more globalization. And it's going to be key to the success of this new Silk Road. So there was a consensus on that. Two, I think there was a consensus that there are many different types of capital that are necessary to achieve economic success, both at the national and the regional level. You need, of course, private physical capital, but you also need public infrastructure capital. You need the right types of human capital. You need institutional and governance capital, because good institutions are important to achieve economic success. You need connectivity capital, and of course, in a knowledge economy, you need knowledge and digital capital. So it's the connection between all these different forms of capital that leads then to successful economic performance. And finally, on the policy side, sound economic policies at home are key, both macro policies and structural policies, but also you need policies at the regional and global level, and those imply important degrees of cooperation and coordination and harmonization. So it's a combination between integration, some types of capital, and policy coordination, harmonization that leads to economic success. Thank you very much. There was a lot of food for thought during this session. I'm told that we're going to have a coffee break now, half an hour, and then there's going to be here another panel about the role of trade to win economic success. So we come back in half an hour. Thank you. Thanks.
Dear forum participants, the next panel will resume after the coffee break. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Gamajoba. Give me a Gamajoba back. Wow. Welcome back, a very warm welcome back from your coffee break. I hope you got to inject some caffeine directly into your veins, because I think you're going to need it. Well, I hope they're going to need it for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aaron Hazelhurst. I'm a news anchor and presenter with BBC World News. I'm based in London, but I'm not British. I'm an Aussie. I'm Australian. I'm only telling you that because don't blame Brexit on me. Okay, want to get that out of the way with. I get to present our BBC World's daily flagship business show, Monday to Friday, and it's called Talking Business with Aaron Hazelhurst. BBC are very creative at times. I broadcast, as I said, daily to just over 100 million viewers daily. But I have to tell you this, I'm very honored to have been invited back to moderate this session. I was with many of you back in 2017. And I also have to say, I'm excited. I'm excited about this panel session. I'm going to introduce our very special guest shortly. I'm excited. And if you know me, and you know I get excited, you're in trouble. Because I'm like a racehorse ready to spring out of the starting gate. And you know, not one person this morning who's been up here on stage has mentioned this incredibly gorgeous building. It is absolutely stunning. So we did have a fabulous start to the day. We had the speech, of course, from the Prime Minister. Then we had that panel session, which we hope you enjoyed, the high-level dialogue that took place up here, some interesting conversations, some good takeaways for all of us. But now we are moving into session 2. Forget session 1. Focus on session 2 now. And this is simply titled Trade to Win. So what's it all about? Well, let me paint you a little picture about some of the key themes that we all need and want to discuss up here with our friends. Yes, of course, this topic is about the further economic integration among the Silk Road countries, as well as with the rest of the world. And we know that is absolutely essential. It's absolutely essential for increasing the contribution of those economies, of those countries, to the global economy. Absolutely very important. And along with that, sustainable development. And we all know that a country's economic development highly depends on a strong and competitive private sector. And most importantly, SMEs, small to medium enterprises, small to medium-sized companies, businesses. SMEs that provide a strong local strength, but with a global reach. That has to be the ultimate key. And again, I say this, I know you all know this, but I do think sometimes it's important for us to take a step back and remind ourselves of just how important SMEs are to all of our economies. Some of the astonishing numbers behind small and medium-sized companies. According to the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, SMEs account for over 95% of all firms. Think about that, 95% of all companies on the planet are small to medium size. Or put it this way, if we take a look at the largest economy in the world, the United States, more than 99% of the nearly 29 million companies in America are small businesses, employing less than 20 people. SMEs account for some 70% of all business employment. These are astonishing numbers, ladies and gentlemen. We also know that small and medium firms, they have specific strengths and weaknesses, right, which will require, I guess, some special policy responses. And as new technologies and globalization reduce the importance of economies of scales in many activities, it actually has the potential to enhances, I should say, small businesses. However, many of the traditional problems SMEs face, they continue, and we certainly have to talk about those. Lack of financing, difficulties in exploring technology, or exploiting, I should say, technology, constrained managerial capabilities, low productivity, lack of infrastructure, all of that all of that means that regulatory burdens become more acute, certainly in a globalized, technology-driven environment. Small companies, small firms need to upgrade their management skills. They need to upgrade their capacity to gather information and their technology base. We know governments need to improve SME access to financing. They need to improve access to information infrastructures and, importantly, access to international markets. You know, providing regulatory, legal, and financial frameworks conducive to entrepreneurship and small startups surely has to be all of our priority. So all of that said, it does mean policymakers are facing, one, some incredible opportunities, some amazing opportunities, but two, they're also facing some big challenges out there. And I ask you this, do you think it's possible to transform those challenges into opportunities to increase the competitiveness of the private sector, of the SMEs, and provide the help and the support they need, the help and support your economies need for their integration into the international or the global markets, really? And finally, I just want to touch on the fourth industrial revolution. Don't be embarrassed. Some people go, well, what is that? So let's take a step back and remind ourselves. We know the first industrial revolution. It was steam. The second was mass production. The third was the digital revolution. That started in the 60s, sort of went to the early 2000s. I'm talking about the introduction of the semiconductor, the internet, personal computers. So technology, right? Yeah. So that leads some to go, well, hang on. What's the difference between what separates the fourth from the third? Well, I'll tell you. Well, I won't tell you. The experts will tell you. I did my research. They say the difference is that today's technology is merging. It's merging more and more into our human lives. And they say the speed at which the technology moves today is faster than ever in history. I'll give you a really brief example because I love this. Did you know it took 75 years for 100 million people to adopt the telephone? 75 years for 100 million people to adopt the telephone, to basically have a telephone. Instagram did it in 2 years. 100 million people in 2 years. That's pretty fast. We can go faster though. You know Pokemon Go? Pokemon Go, the gamer, did it in 1 month. 100 million users in 1 month. That is some speed. The fourth industrial revolution, ladies and gentlemen, as you surely know, is the convergence of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual augmented reality, 3D printing, the Internet of Things, all of that into still unimagined new products, services, and even industries. Yeah. So without a doubt, this latest revolution will have, actually is having right now, an effect on international trade and global commerce. This includes, the flow of many operations with real goods and services moving into the digital space. Cross-border commerce is becoming more inclusive with new ways and certainly new opportunities for international businesses, all as a result of digitalization. But the scope and the complexity of these changes will certainly herald many will say the transformation of entire systems of production, of management, and governance. The fourth industrial revolution, ladies and gentlemen, has the power to reshape almost every sector in every country, creating new opportunities, creating challenges as well, for places, for businesses, to which we must respond. We can't ignore it. And we must respond in a cohesive and a comprehensive manner, involving all the stakeholders for a global policy, because it needs to be global, from the public and the private sectors to academia and civil society. The big question is, can we do it? I doubt sometimes, but let's see. Okay, enough from me for now, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to get to introduce our wonderful panelists who have been very patient. So let's start with Mr. Gennady Albaladze, who is the deputy, right in the middle there, the Deputy Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia. Gennady has widespread experience in foreign trade and economics. He has effectively contributed to the diversification and the development of Georgia's foreign trade. He was Georgia's chief negotiator on free trade agreements with the European Free Trade Association, the People's Republic of China, including Hong Kong, and the UK. We could use you soon, by the way. The UK could use you very soon. Next to Gennady is Dr. Sahar Nasser, a Minister of Investment and International Cooperation of the Arab Republic of Egypt, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause. Sahar has published over 60 research papers, technical reports, and books in the fields of international finance, economic development, private sector, and SME development, as well as the fields of financial reform, the labour market, women empowerment, and economic legislation. She also carries extensive experience in negotiating and securing international grants and loans, especially within her role as a former lead economist at the World Bank. Good stuff. Okay, next up we have Ivan Scalfarotto, who's the Under-Secretary of State of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. Buongiorno. Previous to his current role, Ivan's held the positions of Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Economic Development. He was in charge of international trade and foreign direct investment. He also served as Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Constitutional Reforms and Government Liaison to Parliament before entering politics. I don't know what made you do that, but anyway, you did. Before that, Ivan worked for over 20 years in the financial services industry, covering senior international HR positions in Milan, London, and Moscow. Also the author and published 3 books. Welcome, Ivan. We're very grateful to have you with us. Next up, it's Mr. Yonov Frederick Agar. Give him a wave. Deputy Director General of the WTO, ladies and gentlemen, the World Trade Organization. You guys are very busy at the moment. Or not so busy, I'm not too sure. Yonov was appointed as Nigeria's ambassador to the WTO back in 2005. In that capacity, he's held the position of head of Nigeria's trade office, which basically means he was responsible for Nigeria's participation in the UN Conference on Trade and Development, the World Intellectual Property Organization, the International Trade Center, and of course the WTO. Agar served as chair of the WTO General Council back in 2011. And last but not least, Ms. Arantxa Gonzalez down the end there, Executive Director of International Trade Center. Welcome, Arantxa. Arantxa has 20 years of experience as an expert on international trade issues. She served as Executive Director of the International Trade Center, the joint development agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, of course. And all of that means is that she brings with her an extensive knowledge about international trade and economics, coupled with a broad experience in trade and development matters in the public and the private sectors, as well as management at multilateral organizations. So, ladies and gentlemen, real privilege to have you here. Let's start, because you're all going to just have a little talk with us. And I've been strict on time. 5 minutes. So, Gennady, do you want to take the stage away? It's yours.
Thank you. Let me first of all greet everyone, the audience and also the members of the panel. It's a great pleasure for me to be the participant of this panel, which is related to trade, and I hope that the discussions will be very interesting and fruitful for everyone. Let me thank also Aaron for moderating the panel, and let me start by expressing the gratitude also for all the guests who came far away from to Georgia and expressed their interest to participate in this very important gathering, the forum that is the 3rd time that we are organizing, and the establishment of which starts back to 2015. This is a very well established format of dialogue, political as well as also the format which we are organizing in the framework of the forum is the investment part of this forum, which is another important direction since Georgia is trying to capitalize the resources that we have and the policies that we introduce to be used by international players from the private sector to utilize those possibilities that are existing in the country, and to attract more and more international businesses. So once we have the topic of trade, trade remains one of the important initiatives that pushes the private sector to develop their businesses as well as also the countries to develop their economies. International trade is becoming more and more important even in everyday life. Since we have this globalization and the challenges and opportunities that is coming from the globalization and the trade that we enjoy most of the time without the borders, because trade is no more, the distance is no more an obstacle to trade with the countries. So whether it is your neighbor or it goes beyond your borders, bordering countries, we trade with the world. So the possibilities are really exhausted. This is a huge possibility also for the companies to utilize those opportunities that rely from liberalizing the economies, by liberalizing the economies and also producing those goods that can be purchased by the consumers from the big economies as well as also small economies. But the countries like Georgia, which is really the small economy, and the similar countries we have it in the region, the only option that we have and we need to act is to integrate our economies to the global economies. Otherwise, as I have already mentioned, in this globalized world, when there is the opened borders, we need to be accustomed to the policies that the countries are having in order to make and to succeed in trade, international trade, and to make also the country's economy to develop. In this regard, as it was mentioned by the moderator, Mr. Aaron, the important role remains SMEs. SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, which are one of the biggest contributors to the economic developments of the countries. And the same is the case with Georgia, since we have very good development in SME direction, and the state programs and all the initiatives that we are providing as a government is dedicated to the development of the private sector, and especially the SMEs. To integrate the SMEs in the global trade and also to make them succeed and to make them stronger than they are today, in order to grow them and to make more trade between the countries. The importance of SMEs in global trade is really very important. But the challenges, what are the challenges that they are facing time by time is sometimes the tariff barriers which they are facing to export their goods to the foreign countries. And the main challenge here is the competitiveness. You know, when we're talking about SMEs, of course, we're talking about the challenge of competitiveness, because they don't have too much room in order to make their products to be purchased in a more competitive priced, as a more competitive priced products. So in this regard, the role of government is really very important. And what is the role of the government is to liberalize the markets, to make the markets to eradicate and those obstacles and those tariffs that are remaining when we are trading with other countries. With that regard, let me share with you the experience that we have in terms of liberalizing the market. It has been mentioned many times during the morning session by the Prime Minister of Georgia, by the Vice Prime Minister of Georgia, that Georgia has one of the liberal economies in the world, and we are proud of being one of the liberal economies. Also, another one which we have done during last years to further liberalize the other markets with whom we trade. This is the greatest achievement that we have achieved during last 7 to 10 years, when we have signed the agreement with the European Union, and at the same time we have the agreement signed with the People's Republic of China. also with all the neighboring countries and with the countries of the big economies, which are really important. Why? Because this also attracts the investments from foreign countries, since, and especially from the bigger economies, because we see that from the bigger economies, they can't trade with each other, but they can trade through Georgia. So having its strategic location to connect east to west, and Georgia has had this role from the very ancient time, being a part of the ancient Silk Road. And it is the role that we are also arguing and also have an ambition to increase the role of Georgia as connecting of west to east by having the free trade agreements with all the regional countries and with all the big economies. This is also important that we need to remove the non-tariff barriers, and I'm finalizing my speech. The non-tariff barriers, which are also one of the biggest obstacles when we are talking about trading, two countries trading with each other. It's sometimes much more obstacle than there are tariffs. And we try with the harmonizing the policies between the countries to also harmonize the systems that we have in the country in order to smoothly facilitate the trade between partner countries who are trading, in order them to transit their goods in a smoother way and without any barriers, without any tariff barriers, as well as without non-tariff barriers. So with signing the free trade agreements and liberalizing the markets, we always mean that we make trading goods available for duty-free, as well as also removing the non-tariff barriers. I thank you very much, and I take much more time for the questions.
Gennady, that's okay.
Thank you.
You're the boss. But you can certainly get more of your message out there when we open it up for Q&A later on. Ladies and gentlemen, some of you already got them out, but I take your device out, whether it's an Apple, a Google, a Xiaomi, a Huawei, take it out, and can we bring up the Slido slide? See what we did there. Okay, so this one, I know some of you, because I can see the voting already, so some of you have done it, but if not, those of you who haven't, please take part. We implore you. We really want to see your see the answer later on. You go into the webpage, as you know, www.sli.do. Slido will come up. And the event code for this one is TRADE-SRF. TRADE-SRF. And the question is, will more trade agreements increase competitiveness of the country? Will more trade agreements increase competitiveness of the country? Okay, you continue that. Saha, would you like to take the stage?
Thanks, Aaron. And first I want to thank the government of Georgia for their kind invitation and their warm welcome. I'm happy to be participating with you, Aaron, on this panel, exciting one. So I'll start with your kickoff statement, which is what's happening globally, and I think it's important to put that into context. Is slowdown overall globally, trade wars, tough times at the region, Brexit, so a bit of slowdown again in Europe, and that's nevertheless that pushes us to even do more reforms. Structural reforms, economic reforms, and deepen economic ties and more effective economic cooperation between the various countries. And I think that's why also our discussion today on the Silk Road is an important initiative, because that's all about economic integration, deepening ties, investment, commercial ties too. So what has been happening and what have we been doing in Egypt in that regard? I think it's very important that we move forward. President Sisi has put a ground vision for the country. We had to move with a very bold economic reform program, significant cut in subsidies, effective targeting, ensuring that there is a sound macroeconomic framework through fiscal and monetary policy, flotation of the currencies, reduction in budget deficits, and also effective inflation targeting. And In parallel, we also moved with the social safety nets because we were very much aware that such economic reform program would have adverse implications, would make it even more challenging, because also after uprisings and revolutions, young people have a lot of aspirations, and that's the time when you need to create more jobs and improve the standard of living of people. And this is where we're working on more South-South cooperation, more trade ties. So under Egypt's current presidency of the African Union, so we've now endorsed free trade agreements that encompasses most of our African countries and neighboring economies, which is also where Egypt is put in a strategic location on the map linking Asia with Africa, and it's one of the top 5 countries with the initiative of the Silk Road, especially with the Suez Canal and the new Suez Canal and the industrial zones located there on the canal. The reforms, one key pillar is improving the business environment, bringing the private sector in, and that's a bit challenging. So despite the slowdown in FDI globally, Egypt managed to have their share as 4% increase in Egypt's share from the global FDI. And not only that, but we're ranked as #1 economy in attracting FDI in Africa. Nevertheless, we know that it's very challenging. We need to do more reforms. So we've amended the investment law, the companies law. For the first time, we have a bankruptcy law. Aaron, you've highlighted the issue of what's happening in the private sector. Is there any crowding out? Yes, we need to do more on financial inclusion, because it is very true that with what's happening globally, that there is definitely crowding out in terms of access to finance, and especially to SMEs, who are the main job creators, not just in large economies like the US, but in emerging markets like Egypt. So they even account for 99% if I include the micro enterprises, which is also a large component of the economy, and an informal sector that we're trying to encourage to formalize. So here we've also amended the capital markets law. We've introduced factoring and financial leasing. We've amended the mortgage finance to allow for a more inclusive system. And so what we're providing now, SMEs, is not just an improved legislative framework as well as structural reforms, but we've also ensured that their access to finance is improved with new instruments and tools. But we package that with a lot of technical assistance and know-how and twinning with other neighboring countries and other emerging economies. Here we have to also highlight the startups, the innovative and the fintech, because that's also an important sector that we're working on, because in Egypt, with the 100 million population, we really need to focus a lot with almost 60% youth. So we need to provide a lot of focus on youth, but also empowering women who are often, in terms of unemployment, they're at a disadvantage, and hence we're providing a lot of focus in terms of the reforms that we undertake. And I'll stop here.
Look at that. Bang on. We have big clocks here that count down and give us our times. Ivan, do you want to take the stage away now?
Yes. Can you hear me?
That's not on. No, that one isn't. Hang on. There, try that one.
This is better.
There you go.
So first of all, I wanted to thank the Georgian government for the hospitality, and also wanted to say that I'm very happy to be back. Actually, I was here 2 years ago. At the time, I was in charge of international trade from the Italian Ministry of Economic Development, and I came here with about 30 companies to have some B2Bs with companies from Georgia, which started nice business between the two countries. And I have to say, I'm very proud to say that Italy is the second EU exporter to Georgia after Germany, and that our trade flow has grown 30% in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So it's going well. Actually, for us, and I'm very glad to be here also for this additional reason, trade for Italy is like oxygen. We thrive on trade. We are a country of transformers. We don't have many raw goods, raw materials. We basically buy things from others, put the Italian genius in them, and sell them to the rest of the world. And we are loved and respected all over the world for the things that we sell. Of course, food, of course, fashion, but not everyone knows that the first thing we sell to the rest of the world is machineries. So we are a country of engineers, mostly. Of course, a lot of people would know the Italian cars, but we're very good in all those technologies that have to do with the fields where we're strong. So, for example, we are strong in food, but we are extremely strong in all the technology applied to food, in transformation, the food chain. Same thing is, of course, with textile and everything where the made in Italy is famous. So, very happy to be talking on a trade panel. Not everyone knows that Italy is the 9th exporter globally, and it's the 5th country for trade surplus. So we can say that basically we are more or less recovered in terms of GDP from the big crisis that started in 2007. If we consider our GDP 100 in 2007, now it would be 100.8. But if we didn't export anything in these last years, we would be 7 points percentage lower in terms of GDP. So we can say that export for Italy was absolutely a pillar for the economy. And people often think of international trade of something very technical that has nothing to do with them. And they always say, that's not the case. And one example I make for people of my age, I always say to friends, do you remember when we were kids, we wouldn't eat salmon apart from Christmas. Salmon was something difficult to eat, or we didn't have avocados on our tables. So international trade has to do with the choices we make, has to do with the life we run, has to do with the price of goods we buy. And also, when I got my job as head of international trade for Italy, I learned a quote from a thinker, an economist and philosopher from France from the 19th century. His name is Frédéric Bastiat, who said a very remarkable statement. He said, when goods don't go across borders, armies will go cross borders. This means that international trade has also to do with peace. When you sell your stuff to others and you buy their stuff, you talk to them. You know them better, you communicate. This means that trade is an incredibly powerful tool of peace. It has to do with politics. I'm a strong supporter of free trade agreements for this reason. And I always say to colleagues and people, listen, when we have a new FTA, we are starting a political relationship. For example, in Italy, and in the rest of Europe, we are discussing a lot of the Mercosur free trade agreement, which is a free trade agreement between two blocks of countries, 800 million people. And of course, it is about selling beef or selling wheat or selling shoes with tariffs or without tariffs. But it has also to do with the links that Italy, for example, has with Argentina. Probably not everyone knows that more than half of Argentinians have Italian legacy. So this means also to create a link, to create a bond. And it is quite irrational, I have to say, that these days a lot of people are against trade, are against free trade agreements, and there are powerful politicians around the world who preach against free trade agreements and in favor of tariffs. I think this is a very, very short-sighted policy, and I think that people of goodwill should always and altogether be on the same side for trade, not against it.
But you're not going to mention any names, are you? I notice.
Yeah, but the time was right.
Yeah, that was very good. Okay. Hey, let's hear from our good friends at the WTO. Yonoff, do you want to take it away? 5 minutes.
Thank you, Aaron. And I wish to thank the government of Georgia for inviting me. I'm happy to be here, and I thank you for your hospitality. I think we have two questions about trade today, the challenges we face. For me, one first part of it is the narrative. All of us agree that trade is important for our development, but we are not agreed on how the benefits from trade are shared. So it's a duty for those of us who benefit from trade to speak up so that the voices of those who think they are losing from trade become more dominant. And this is not just between countries, it's also within countries. Which sectors benefit, which regions benefit, this remains a controversy. The challenge for us then would be what to do. The global economy is changing. The way we trade is changing. The opportunities are changing. So first, what do national governments need to do to adapt their policies, support to businesses to ensure they benefit from trade? I think that should be one of the core points. The academia, what are you doing in terms of research, empirical-based analysis that will make policy more relevant? Civil society, what are you doing in terms of educating your populations as to what will be the benefits for trade? And then the private sector, how do you engage your government to now address those issues that are of interest to you? I served as a negotiator, and sometimes I see in the room conversations that do not reflect the business interests in some of the countries. Sometimes it's the ambassadors hyping up to themselves. So how do you ensure that the kinds of changes we need in the WTO, for example, now that we are talking of reform, are those that respond to your trade needs in the current environment? So can anybody say that we don't need electronic commerce? Can anybody say the implementation of the trade facilitation agreement was not useful to small, medium-sized enterprises? In a country like Georgia, the service sector is dominant, how would you not participate in the ongoing discussions on electronic commerce in the WTO? These are issues that we should be looking at. And I believe, let's forget the negativity. I am always optimistic. The challenges, the crisis challenges of the system today have always been with us. If you go back to history, each time we have a crisis, each time the need for the system becomes more evident. We had the Havana Charter and ended up with the GATT. We had the challenges during the Uruguay round, but we still ended up with success. We have had challenges with the Doha round, yet we have delivered on trade facilitation, on export competition in agriculture, and tariff rate quotas in agriculture. So let's look more on the positive side. Let's get engaged, look at what is the real problem of business today and how you benefit. Whether you do this regionally or multilaterally, you must say, at the end of the day, your national policies are important. So the agreements you reach in the WTO or which you reach in regional frameworks will remain inactive, will remain opportunities if we do not develop the right national policies to take advantage of those opportunities. So I call on you, support the WTO, ensure you have a more reformed, responsive, multilateral, rules-based system that responds to your trade needs and interests, so that all of us can use trade as a tool for development, a tool to generate growth in the global economy, the growth from which each individual country can tap and develop and make progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Yonof. Great. Before we get stuck into some fun Q&A, we're going to hear from the International Trade Center. Arantxa, last but certainly not least.
All right, I only have 5 minutes, and Aaron is going to be ruthless with me. So I have 3 messages to pass, and I will use Twitter style so that it's shorter. Number 1, when in a hole, stop digging. We are in a hole. Global growth has been revised downwards. Global trade growth has been revised downwards. Global foreign direct investment, a sharp drop of 20% in the first 6 months of this year compared to last year, and last year was already low. Drop in business confidence. All of this means instability and turbulence, and at the center of this instability and turbulence, it's trade conflicts. So what we need to start with is to calm down. We need to go back to the negotiating table. We need to put not only the US and China, certainly the US and China, but all other countries around the table. We know the name of this table is called World Trade Organization. We know what needs to be done. It needs to reform the rules of international trade, but unilateralism and protectionism will not deliver that. It's not delivering it while it's making the global economy weaker. Number two, small is not just beautiful. Small is smart. When you support small and medium enterprises, which in a country like Georgia is 99% of all your businesses, you're making sure that global growth percolates to the lowest levels of society. You make sure that growth is more inclusive. You grow more and you grow in a more solid way. Now, it's been said the problem with small and medium enterprises is they have a huge competitiveness gap compared to large companies. And here too, trade is very helpful because internationalization, which is the 21st century name for trade, helps build the competitiveness of SMEs. SMEs which trade are more competitive than those who do not trade. And it's pretty simple. When you trade, you have to fight against a larger number of competitors out there. You have to be stronger. Now, the bad news for Georgia is that its small and medium enterprises are not very internationalized. But let me just say they are not yet very internationalized because I know the government is working hard on making sure that the 3% of small companies that trade or the 15% of medium enterprises in Georgia which trade go at least to the level of the regional average, which is 15% and 25% respectively. And we are, as International Trade Center, working with the government, proud to contribute to these efforts. And again, it's a smart politics, it's the smart policies that we are talking about, not just being nice. Number three, this is my third and last tweet, you need other than trade to make trade work. In other words, it's not enough to have a great trade policy. It's not enough to sign good trade agreements. This is why you know what my answer to that question would be. That is a prerequisite, it's a necessary but insufficient condition to make trade work. To make trade work, you also need smart domestic policies, social safety nets at home that would help those who will inevitably lose their jobs as a result of technological progress get back into the job market. You need smart investments in infrastructure, and we heard a lot about that in the first session this morning, so I'll not go into that. I would only say that, to me, a very critical component of infrastructure has to do with digital infrastructure, because that digital connectivity is what will allow the transformation of entire sectors of the economy, including agriculture, that also could benefit from the greater technological content. You also probably need to work a little bit smartly internationally at taxation. It's a big issue. We haven't talked about this, but there are a lot of problems in this more digital economy from the fact that there is huge tax competition between countries that probably would need to be tackled. So more than trade to make trade work. And those countries, the countries that are doing this, are drawing immense benefits. Those who have great trade policies but lousy domestic policies at home, I will mention no one specifically, but probably we can develop that in the next session, will end up digging deeper into the hole.
Oh, okay. Well, on that note, thanks, Arantxa. Let's stay on the theme, just before we get into SMEs, stay on the theme of the global picture. Because I was wondering, Ivan, if you and Arantxa work together, because you were just nodding, you were agreeing pretty much.
Completely. I think she said a lot of very sensible things, and especially on SMEs, and especially also on the safety net that you need for people when they go through changes. If you leave them alone, because I think it's objectively true that trade and free trade helps to grow economies. So overall, there will be a growth. But there was an Italian poet once that said that the average is that thing that if I eat 2 chickens and you eat 0, it's 1 chicken per person. Okay, so and at the end, so average is not always satisfactory, and you have to do something. And I also agree with Arantxa that, especially for SMEs, and I'm speaking as the representative of a government of a country where, again, 98% of companies are SMEs, and as I said before, we are a very large exporter. So this means that we export goods made by SMEs. And so what do? How can we help them as the second manufacturing power in Europe to get the train of Industry 4.0? Actually, we've done something, because we need to make sure that they are able to stay in line with the latest technology, and still, especially, that the quality of a product remains attractive. Because, regardless of technology, Italians are famous because they can produce beautiful things with their hands, and things that you can touch. We are craftsmen. And so you need on one side to make sure that that skill set, which is so precious, so difficult to reproduce also, which is a very strong protecting factor from global competition. If you are the only one to be able to do something, you need to make sure that future generations get that skill set, but also that in the way in which you produce, you are able to, at the same time, to keep the ancient tradition and the identity that makes you unique, and on the other hand, you are able to connect with the internet and to make sure that all the logistics are fixed and are efficient, and so you really need to make things the old way in the new world, which is, of course, very difficult. 53 seconds?
No, that's no, sorry, the time is, that's what you were doing.
Just one thing. Yep. What we've done, in one word, was helping companies, even very small companies, to buy new technologies, giving them big boosts in terms of tax advantages by the fact of buying a new equipment. So once they digitized, they got big fiscal advantage, and also we supported research and training. Because if you have the machines, but you don't have the brain power to use those, that's completely useless.
Okay, and I'll come back to that now, because I want to find out some of the challenges. Yeah, ignore the clock now, by the way. Ignore the clock. Gennady, just before we move on, still staying on this global picture, just from Georgia's perspective, your perspective, are you concerned with what we're seeing at the moment, the global picture? And we've summed it up. Everybody's summed it up very nicely. And the impact that could have on the Silk Road project, the impact that a global slowdown or recession could have on financing, small to medium-sized businesses, or at least their access to finance. What's your take on it?
I don't have any other right not to agree with my colleagues to the points that has been mentioned. Let me start with addressing the issues that government of Georgia is trying to address by facilitating and making SMEs much more international. And this was mentioned here by Mrs. Arantxa, that what we lack in the country is that we need much more international SMEs, to go them more international, to export more, and to make them much more stronger, because we think that by making them international, we are increasing their competitiveness. And we are trying to facilitate this through making them to find the partners on international markets and to also sell their goods, which they sell, to be much more competitive in price-wise as well as also quality-wise. So with regard to the quality-wise, we need to introduce the SMEs need to introduce and strengthen the quality infrastructure. The quality infrastructure, which is one of the obstacles because it is costly, and sometimes they don't have too much money for this, and they cannot afford. So this is one of the challenges they face. and also the high taxes that in general the SMEs are paying. So this is also one of the challenge, but in Georgia, this is the place where we offer the lowest taxation, and this is why Georgia is and has been attractive for international players to produce here, because Georgia has been recognized, according to the World Bank, as a third least tax burden country. So high taxes matters when we're talking about the trade and to make them to compete with internationally within the country and outside. Also, when we talk about the technology and digitalization, this is also one of the important things that we need to develop, and where government's engagement is very crucial. Since this is also costly for the private sector, and here I need to mention that the customs clearance procedures, one-stop shop principle development to provide all the services to the businesses, to the SMEs, as faster way as possible. Because why it matters, since we're talking about the globalization, if we're talking about the competitiveness in this globalized world and the connectivity, then the matter of competitiveness, one of the matters are to deliver the goods in a faster and smoother way. So to deliver the goods in a faster way, you need to develop the infrastructure within the country. And this is one of the things that we are developing also, to have more connectivity with the countries in the region, to facilitate, to exchange the information also digitally, and to receive the information in a faster way in order to smoothly transit the goods and services between the countries in the region and beyond.
Okay, we're going to talk more about the fourth industrial revolution and digitalization. But can I ask you this, Arantxa, while we've got you? Why, given the huge importance we touched on, I rattled off all those numbers of SMEs to any economy, why is there, okay, we've heard some advancements, improvements coming from Egypt and Italy, Georgia, but why typically is there always those concerns for SMEs, the lack of finance, the infrastructure, the management capabilities? Why, given they're so important, why do we struggle?
Because it is tough. Because it is tough to do. It's easy to have a program to help your top 10 multinational companies or big businesses internationalize. It's tough to do it for SMEs. It takes longer term and it requires medium to long-term policies, which is also something that sometimes political systems in countries have difficulty with providing.
Because they're too short-sighted?
Well, because they are very often very short cycle.
Right.
Not just short-sighted, but short cycle.
Yeah.
But I would say, first, SMEs is a very heterogeneous concept. You've got micro, you've got small, you've got medium. Agriculture is very different from manufacturing, which is very different from services. So the first thing is to unpack this. Get your facts and figures right. Get your statistics to tell you what is your SME landscape. Unpack this by men and women, and you will discover an amazing thing. Out of 5 exporters, SME exporting worldwide, only 1 is a woman-owned business, despite the fact that women-owned businesses are close to 40% of all SMEs worldwide. So get your data right, unpack this SME reality, and then start supporting 3 things. Help the SMEs connect, help the SMEs, which is a lot of what we are discussing here, help the SMEs compete, and quality, I agree with Gennady, is amazingly important. We just supported an SME in Georgia become approved supplier for Nestle with dried fruits. It's agriculture, but it's not just agriculture. It's value-added agriculture, and it's not just any value chain, it's Nestle's value chain. It's a huge opportunity. So help them compete, and finally help the SMEs change. Connect, compete, and change. This is what, at the end of the day, is behind quality, skills, infrastructure, finance, research, and the rest. These are the 3 things you need to do, and unpack your data, and you will discover amazing surprises in your ecosystem.
Does the WTO, Yonov, do you agree with that? If I was to ask you that same question about why do they struggle when they're so important, or why do we struggle?
Yes, I think the WTO does respond to the needs of the members. Whether each of the members adopts a policy approach that takes advantage of these opportunities is a different thing. And I give you an example. Take the issue of standardization. In the WTO, you have the technical barriers to trade agreement, you have the SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures agreement. Under each of these agreements, cooperation among the standard setting bodies is virtually mandatory. Sharing of information, getting mutually recognition of standards, checking conformity assessment tests, making sure these reduce risks to both importers and exporters are there. Whether a member decides to take advantage of that framework is a different ballgame. So, for example, under our Aid for Trade initiative, a lot of money has gone into supporting members develop national quality infrastructure. So if a member doesn't have national quality infrastructure as a policy objective, whatever we do will not amount to anything. If you have that at the back of your mind, then that will feed into your regional framework, whether it is the Silk Road Network, is the African Continental Free Trade Area, or the multilateral disciplines in the WTO. Or you could equally do it bilaterally, maybe between Georgia and the United States, Georgia and China. Because once a certificate is issued that this product has conformed to this quality, you don't need to test it in the importing country. And that will help reduce costs for SMEs who on their own cannot set up the laboratories, do the tests, which may, even if they can, add to trade costs and make them uncompetitive.
Okay, so can I go back to you? Because you were talking about one of the big concerns or the problems for SMEs is the access to finance. You said you've implemented new tools to help SMEs access finance.
Yes, indeed.
In practical terms, what are they?
You've highlighted a lot of challenges in your introductory statement on what kind of problems the SME face. So access to finance is a problem, so we've introduced new financial instruments and tools. For example, they are perceived by the formal financial sector as more risky. So you need to provide credit guarantees. So that's how you go deep dive. Banks often require having 2 consecutive years financial statement that shows they are viable. And this is where you need to bring in the non-bank financial institutions that would not necessarily require that. They need guarantees, so you have to provide equity financing, not just debt financing. And this is where the startup comes from. So you need to provide a more diversified spectrum of financial instruments and tools to these SMEs. But again, you've highlighted that they lack the skills, and that's important to highlight, especially in emerging economies where sometimes often there is a mismatch between what the labor market needs and the skills the education system provides. And hence, you need to also train, provide capacity building, and these SMEs do not necessarily have the same resources the large multinationals would able to hire the best legal advisors, the best accountants, the auditors. And hence, this is where, again, you need to provide a lot of capacity building and technical skills and mentoring and twinning with other more advanced companies from other parts of the world. And this is where we are doing a lot of partnership with the World Bank, with IFC, with EBRD, where lines of credits have been provided but packaged with a lot of capacity building and technical assistance, international best practices. Clusters, value chains, because the marketing is one key challenge, and the value chain here and having clusters specialized in a specific sector. This is where you bring a lot of technology know-how. I want to just highlight the infrastructure is very important.
Yes, that's very important, because stay there, because I was going to, you've got the mic, I was going to ask you the question about the challenges with that, with a developing economy, building the right infrastructure, certainly up to international standards. That's proved a challenge for Egypt?
Yes, that's a major challenge, and that's why infrastructure is very important for SMEs. And if you're really after free trade agreements, and if after connectivity, and in a huge country with 100 million population with 27 governors, you need to ensure connectivity, because free trade agreements alone, without the maritime, without the roads, without the railways, without the digital connectivity, how can you trade?
Yeah. And now, actually, no, that's fine. Let me go on to Ivan then. Ivan, what are the key areas you think of making Italian SMEs very competitive and dealing with the world?
Again, I think quality is number one. I think the quality of the product is very good. Specialization. I think, of course, being SMEs, one of the challenges they face is investing in research and development, and also when going international, better.
Yeah.
When going international, you have some fixed costs that can be a challenge. But we have what we call districts, so areas in the countries where there is a long-standing tradition. For example, it's very likely that the glasses, the spectacles you're wearing are made in Italy, and are made in a special region of Italy, which is the region north of Venice, where basically everyone works in the industry. So it is true that you have small and medium enterprises, but they work together as a network. So some may produce the glass, some may produce special, screws, or someone will design the glasses and make sure the weight of the glasses is such that you can wear them all day long without feeling heavy.
But is skill a problem, just like Sahar had mentioned?
That's one big theme, making sure that we pass the skill set on to future generations, that we make those jobs sexy. For example, I always make the example that up to 20 years ago, no one wanted to be a cook, a chef, Right. Now, for some reason, everyone wants to be a chef. Now, I think we should make sure, for example, in the fashion industry, we have some jobs that are disappearing. For example, when you have a sketch of a suit, then there is someone making that suit exist, like an architect. And that's a very specialized job, very difficult to find. So we should make sure that there are more people, and people feeling that they can grow in the job, that they can have a career, and they can have, they can make some money out of it, because that's a real treasure for us.
Yeah. Arantxa, that's a really interesting point about SMEs with research and development, R&D. How do they get around that? Because they don't have the funds, right? As compared to the big guys out there.
Yeah, and this is where what matters is the ecosystem that you would build at home to support the SMEs. It's not about having a research and development department for every SME in your country. It's having a place where they can go if they want to think, if they want to ideate, if they want to co-create, which is where having a network of incubators, accelerators, research centers that would help feed this technology into the lowest level of the business community would be so essential. And this is what countries are doing in a very useful manner. It also, by the way, creates another type of jobs, which is those of incubators, accelerators, and research centers. But it's, in my view, on this research and development, the most important ingredient is the mindset. And this is where we have to change. It's not just building a physical space, but inculcating in the entrepreneur, which, by the way, is a profession. It's not just a hobby. Being an entrepreneur is a profession and should be skilled as such.
But is that mindset everybody? You're talking about everybody, from regulators to the individuals themselves?
Absolutely, from the regulators, and we've heard a lot of the very good things that Georgia is doing, because they've understood that the regulator has to regulate with this entrepreneurial, innovative mindset, but it's also on the entrepreneur itself. It's on the culture that the country has towards the entrepreneur. How do you see failure of the entrepreneur? Are you going to chastise the entrepreneur that failed, or rather are you going to inculcate a risk-taking, if you wish, attitude that would help the entrepreneur take a bit more into innovation and research. So mindset, ecosystem, and mindset are your two big levers if you want to act.
Saha, you got something?
I want to share something, a survey that was just announced at 2 days ago at the World Bank and IMF annual meetings. It's about MENA region in general, it's about youth, that I totally agree about the culture and that sometimes young people in the region are waiting for the government to offer them the job.
It's handed on a silver platter.
Exactly, and they don't want to become an entrepreneurs. They don't want to create their own business, and I think it's very important that we work on the young people's aspirations, making them become more of entrepreneurs and not waiting for the guaranteed government jobs. I think that's very important to highlight. And this is why in Egypt we established an authority that is just dedicated for SMEs, that not only provides lines of credit, technical assistance, but also a lot of awareness on how it is rewarding to become your job creator and not waiting for a job.
Ivan, look, I'm really worried, conscious of the time. It's ticking away here, and I've got to pull up the answer too for from our poll we did earlier. I sort of digitalization, e-commerce. How is Italy helping SMEs in that arena?
As I said, we had this plan called Industry 4.0, where we have to say, a big investment. It was 20 billion euros. So it was a couple of years ago, and it has been refinanced every year. And the plan is really to make sure that, especially in terms of plants and machineries, that since we are a manufacturing economy, that we are able to make sure that we renew plants and that we incorporate digitization. So it was a strong push for enterprises, and that was regardless of where they were based, of the dimension and also the economic sector. So we said we were trying to make a factor policy rather than a sector policy. So whatever company you would be, you might be, if you bought a new machinery and spent to train your people to use it and or devolved money for research and development, that would be fiscally advantageous for the company. And of course, to go back to what Arantxa said, the existence of districts, so of areas where there is a highly specialized kind of industries, that helped to put together, to basically put in common skill centers. And we also worked with universities to make sure that, especially in that case, there would be man-factor or brain power factors developed.
Okay. Can I answer this, Yonoff, again, and then we're going to do the poll question. Do you think, there's a lot of talk always, and I do it on my show, regulators can never keep up with the technology at the pace it's moving. Do you think regulators in different parts of the world are holding back the opportunities for SMEs in the digitalized space?
Well, I don't think they are holding back. It's whether they are responding. I mean, evolving trends can never be stopped. The emerging digital economy cannot be stopped. How do you, as a government, interested in using the opportunities of the digital economy, assist your small businesses, your business people adapt? Are you going to make rules that are business friendly? Or are you going to make rules that check just the security aspects of the digital economy? So these are challenges. But like I said, it depends on where you want to be and what you need to do. So most of us have bureaucrats who are unable to roll up their sleeves and think through the new challenges. How you do that very well, how you benefit will, in the long term, determine the kinds of good examples and the lessons to be learned from the failures of others.
Okay, just very briefly, you want to say?
Yes, I just want to say in Egypt how digitalization helped a lot, SMEs especially, but in general, because we used to have red tape bureaucracy. digitalization and automation have generally streamlined a lot of steps. That helped a lot.
So you've seen the proof in...
Yes, provided level playing field, because then they have equal access to markets, not just to finance, but they're able to access the land opportunities available. They're able to connect with the world in a digital way with the less cost and much more effective manner. I think that helped a lot in streamlining their business, and that's very much recorded in the Doing Business latest ranking. And establishing is now done within hours, contrary to a few weeks in the past.
Wow, really? Okay. Did you say you wanted just very briefly?
Yeah, very briefly. I'll be this time very short. About the digitalization, it is really very important for addressing the challenges that SMEs are facing. So here, the government's role is very important.
So use the technology.
Yes, to use the technology and also to receive the services from public sector through the digitalization, like all the services to be provided digitally. And in this regard, we are also progressing as a government. We have around more than 60% of the total public services provided digitally, and we are working 100% without even SMEs and all the businesses going some offices, public services to be received in office. But they can receive it from their own offices and the homes. So this is really very important because it saves the time for them and it makes them much more competitive since it's also cost effective. And also what is important in order to make SMEs competitive is like innovation is one of the important directions.
Yeah.
And with that regard, we also support through different state support programs the innovation-based economy to be developed in the country. And here the SMEs, support of SMEs to innovate and to support their R&Ds are really very important. Also the development of infrastructure in terms of this broadband to be accessible for all the people in order to innovate and to make...
Well, you need the infrastructure first before you can... Yes,
to make their ideas to convert it to the businesses.
Okay, okay. So we're going to wrap up now. Do we have a slide that actually has the results? I mean, I've got them here, but... Or can we just bring it up again, if that's possible? So there we go, 89, well, more trade agreements, increased competitiveness of the country. Less than a minute, each one of you, this is how we're going to sort of sum up this whole thing. I think I know where you say. Arantxa, what do you say about this?
I say that trade agreements make trade possible, but you still need to make trade happen. And the trade agreement will not make trade happen, it will make it possible. So remember, make trade possible, make trade happen, and ensure trade works for all. That's the task.
Janov, 30 seconds. What do you say about that?
Well, the more trade agreements you have, the more opportunities to use trade as an instrument for development, the more areas that you can exploit, and therefore, the more policies you will need to align to the different agreements. Okay. At the end, how well you do that makes you more competitive.
Okay. Gennady, 30 seconds.
I think having as more as possible the trade agreements is really very important because it opens up the markets and this gives them opportunities and possibilities for the businesses to trade with each other. So this is up to the government to create this on the policy level to open up the markets, and then it's up to them to use those markets and the possibilities. But as I have already mentioned, there are challenges which they are facing, and there is some engagement contribution needed also from the government, but also they need to work as hard as possible in order to utilize those possibilities that is coming up from the trade agreements. Because opening up the market, it's all about the connectivity, and it's all about the globalization. If we are talking about the globalization, we should open up the markets with each other.
Okay.
Thank you.
Saha, 30 seconds.
I want to be a bit controversial here.
Oh, we like that.
With the trade wars and the very protective policies that
we're seeing at the moment.
Economies, yes, or large economies. I think it's very important we have trade agreements, but I think we need to ensure equal opportunities. We want to make sure it's a win-win, knowing that there are large economies and emerging economies. So I think this is very important to highlight, especially in the context of the SDGs and leaving no one behind. So on trade also, we need to leave no one behind.
Okay, a very good point.
For us, this is a...
Oh, you and your microphones. Huh?
Yes, thank you. For us, this is a big resounding yes, because Italian trade happens anyway. Most of times, international customers are available to pay a bit more to buy Italian.
Right.
So if there's a tariff, for example, the tariffs that have been announced these days on our cheese and some of our spirits, most of the producers feel, of course, not happy, but they say, we'll try to manage because our kind of client still want our products. However, I think FTAs could be very useful to work with other countries on things like environment, like social rights. By negotiating an FTA, you can work with other countries to try to convey some messages which are not just related to trade, but to other developing factors for both, in a win-win approach.
You know, many will say, and have said about the cheese and the new taxes, what's cheese got to do with planes? Plane makers, but no.
Big question.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you give a round of applause, please, for our special guests up on stage? Thank you. They always fly, and I've had a million more questions, but I've got to let you guys go. You're going to lunch now. I'll see you later on. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, mate. Yeah. At the time just flies, though, doesn't it? Time just flies. Thanks. Thank you, my friend. Sorry, the time just flies. You're brilliant. I want to be in another session with you. Thanks, Ivan. This is good stuff, mate.
Dear forum participants, allow us to remind you that the lunch for the forum participants is served at the Museum of Modern Arts, Mohamed Tbilisi. The forum panels will resume after the lunch.